Good evening. I'm Matthews Mayor John Hegden. I'd like you to welcome everyone to our November 9th, 2020 Board of Commissioners meeting. I'd like to start with some introductions. We have Commissioner Dave Bland, our Town Attorney Charles Buckley, Commissioner Ken McCool, Commissioner Larry Whitley, Mayor Pro Tem Renee Garner, Town Clerk Lori Canapino, Commissioner Jeff Miller, Town Manager Hazen Blodgett, Commissioner John Urban, our Planning Director Jay Camp, Assistant Town Manager Becky Hawk, and I also see that our Communications Coordinator Maureen Keith is with us, and probably a few others, but I'll dispense with further introductions for right now. I'd like to remind everyone that due to Mecklenburg County's COVID-19 Phase 3 order, once again, this meeting of the Matthews Board of Commissioners will be conducted remotely using the Zoom virtual meeting platform. The Town of Matthews is committed to transparency and robust public participation during these challenging times. Also remind everyone that the mayor and commissioners will vote on each item by roll call vote, meaning each member will be polled to individually state their vote for the record. They will also raise their hand to visually indicate their vote. So for those of you that care to, please join me in the invocation. Dear Lord, we are here tonight only a few days removed from a historic election, an election season that finds our great nation divided. From local to state to federal contests, we find some supporters of candidates in the aura of happiness and victory, and others surrounded by a sense of sadness and defeat. Some may wonder if we can survive the bitter division that continues to tear at the soul of America. So tonight, our prayer is for reconciliation. Help us remember that your greatest wish for us, that we be agents of love and peace. Help us find common ground in a collective service to others. Help us to listen to opposing viewpoints with understanding and respect, and not automatic disdain or contempt. Indeed, help us listen more and speak less. Help us realize that our greatest strength lies in the diversity that you have blessed us with. Help us seek out your grace in others and rebuild this nation by lifting up those who are less fortunate than ourselves, those that are sick or lonely or tired or in need of a helping hand. As we enter this holiday season, help us reconnect and repair strained relationships. Heal us, Lord, so that we can truthfully live up to the promise of the name that our forefathers conferred on our great experiment in democracy, the United States of America. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
We will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've actually asked town staff to upgrade us a bit from the little flag I usually held up. We're going to actually have a more appropriate, I think, picture of the American flag. So please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 4 and recognize Small Business Saturday. Jay, we have a proclamation Jay's going to put on the screen, and I'll just read it. Again, proclamation and recognition of Small Business Saturday. Whereas the government of the Town of Matthews celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community, according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 30.7 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all firms with paid employees in the United States, are responsible for 64.9% of the net new jobs created from 2000 to 2018. And whereas small businesses employ 47.3% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, 62% of small businesses reported they need to see consumer spending return to pre-COVID levels by the end of 2020 in order to stay in business. 65% of U.S. small business owners said it would be most helpful to their businesses to have their regulars return and start making purchases again. And 3/4 of U.S. consumers are currently looking for ways to shop small and support their community. And whereas 96% of consumers who shopped on Small Business Saturday agree that shopping at small, independently owned businesses supports their commitment to making purchases that have a positive social, economic, and environmental impact. And 97% of consumers who shopped on Small Business Saturday agree that small businesses are essential to their community. And whereas 95% of consumers who shopped on Small Business Saturday reported the day makes them want to shop or eat at small, independently owned businesses all year long, not just during the holiday season. Whereas the town of Matthews supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday, therefore, I, John F. Higdon, do hereby proclaim November 28, 2020 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community and the communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. So thank you for that. And we certainly do want to support our small businesses, and I urge everyone, and I'm sure we will, support them as much as possible, not only during the season, but all year long. So we'll move on to agenda item number 5, receive an update on COVID-19 from our Emergency Operations Center Commander, Rob Kinnenberg. Rob. Rob, I believe you're still muted.
Shit.
Chief Kinnenberg, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You are on live now.
Okay. All right. Well, something's going on my end. So today is day 241 of EOC activity related to COVID. Today, the health department reported 36,358 cases, 410 deaths as of 9 o'clock this morning. As we're aware, the governor extended phase 3 on October 21st. Continuing the indoor and outdoor limitations through November 13th. So we expect some new directive from the governor's office in the next few days. There's been a lot of discussion about rising case counts. Our case count has increased 10% over 14 days, reflecting a slight decrease in the rate of increase over the previous 14 days. That to say, we're on a steady, slow upward trajectory. The health department reports 136.2 cases per 100,000 Mecklenburg County residents and a 7% test positivity rate, which places us in moderate to severe community spread. Deaths related to COVID have increased 6.5% over the last 2 weeks, and we are now seeing an average of 216 new cases a day. In the last 2 weeks, area hospitals have experienced a slow but steady increase in the average number of COVID patients hospitalized. As of today, there was 161, and an increase in the number of patients on a ventilator. Today, there were 29. The social indexing or distancing index has shown a slight decrease through September, but improved in October and currently sits about 35, just above where it was in early June. As of November 4th, 110 public safety first responders from 15 agencies were out due to COVID. The agencies have worked with the health department to help ensure rapid testing to maintain adequate staffing, especially in the Mecklenburg County Town Fire and Police Departments. Matthews has had success working through Novant to test our employees. Our learning pod at Cruise Road continues to serve about 16 students a day and is projected to run through December. Things we're dealing with currently, the state would still prefer that counties on a regional basis enact some level of local control to control the spread, but nobody really knows what that looks like. There was a news article last week on WBT about concerns about the policy board by Trevor Fulton of the county commission. The policy board is acting exactly as it should under the tenets of incident command. And to our knowledge, the elected officials are being appropriately informed about the direction that the policy board believes that the county should go. CMS K through 5th grade students returned to the classroom on November 2nd. We've seen no problems with that so far. CMS middle school students returned November 23rd on an A-day, B-day rotation, and high schoolers return in December. On a different front, the Charlotte region is anticipating between 3 and 6 inches of rain over this week and into the weekend as 2 storm fronts collide over the southeast. We got through Halloween with very few problems here in town, although house parties and illegal gatherings were prevalent in the city. Now our thoughts are turning to Thanksgiving, and I would say the same thoughts have to be taken when folks start thinking about whether they're going to have aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents over for Thanksgiving. Post-election protest activity did go on this weekend on a small scale in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, nothing locally. Again, on November 13th, phase 2.5 ends, so we await the governor's directive. And on a positive but negative note, there is mention that Mandy Cohen, the state health director, may be tapped for a position in the Biden administration to deal with COVID, which would be our loss, but a national gain. So I will end my report there.
Thank you, Rob. Do we have any questions for just like to reiterate, we were speaking of Dr. Cohen. She has said on a couple different meetings that I sat in on, and we were discussing it today at a Rotary luncheon, that God willing, if we have really good weather in Matthews on Thanksgiving and we're having family and friends over to eat, the suggestion is to do it outside if there's any way possible. So hopefully it'll be mild weather and not raining or not too cold, but much safer outdoors than a very tiny, crowded dining room. So I've heard Dr. Cohen mention that on more than one occasion. So I'm not seeing any questions or comments for Rob. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you. Good update. Mr. Manager, are there any items to be added to the agenda?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Can we add one? I would like to just mention for informational purposes under new business 13B that we've had a request to consider renaming Stumptown Park. So I just want to bring that to your attention. We won't vote on it tonight, but I just want to make the board aware of that. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Lori, do we have anybody sign up for public comment tonight?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Move on to agenda item 8, recess the regular meeting for public hearings on an application to amend the Unified Development Ordinance and land use map of the town of Matthews. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Thank you, Commissioner. A motion from Commissioner McCool, a second from Commissioner Miller. We'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. Would like to note that our first item, 8A, zoning application 2020-717. Lori, are the applicants, they had a conflict tonight. Are they currently present?
No, sir, they are not.
Okay, so they realized they had a conflict late this afternoon and asked if we could kind of rearrange our schedule. So we'll go on to item 8B, and we may have to go in and out of our regular meeting to accommodate them, but they had a last minute conflict. So we'll go on to zoning item 8B, zoning application 2020-719, text amendment to change standard number 6 for outdoor sales of goods in conjunction with a permanent business, the B1 SCD district. Mr. Hallman. Or Jay.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll introduce planning board while Darren is elevated. Here with us from planning board this evening, we have our chair, Mike Foster, Natasha Edwards, Jonathan Clayton, Tom Dorsey, Jim Johnson, Carrie Lamson, Jana Reeve, and Mike Rowan.
Great, thank you.
And while Darren's getting ready, I will go ahead and pull up the agenda item.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. So this is a text amendment. It is to remove the 120-day limitation from the sale of semi-truck trailers. So this proposal is by Home Depot. As you recall, last month or the month before, we did go through a conditional or changing conditions for that site. This is a second. Well, it's not really the second part of that, but it is in conjunction with that. These are primarily for the pine straw trailers. So the text is being proposed. It does separate out the zoning districts in the shopping center district. And right now the trailers or the proposed trailers are limited to the front and rear of the building. Just a few examples of some of the other communities around the county. Charlotte and Huntersville do prohibit sales from trailers, as well as Davison for anything that's over 30 feet in length. Pineville only limits them for microbrewery uses, and then Mint Hill doesn't have any explicit limitations. And Jay, if you could scroll down to the text. Right, and so when I say that it breaks it out into different districts. So these standards only apply for the outdoor sale of goods in our historic urban core, which is primarily downtown, our B1, B3, BD, BH, industrial districts, and then a few of our conditional only districts. And the way that it's written the proposed text is written right now, this would only apply to the shopping center districts. And then Jay, if you could scroll down to that, I believe it's a location map. And so the primarily affected area would be around 74 and 51. And then I would like to note, I did leave out one shopping center district. So McKee Farms at the corner of Weddington and McKee Road is also zoned shopping center. And so it would be affected as well. Staff would like the board to consider a few additional standards as well. Primarily, staff feels that it may be appropriate to limit the sale of the type of goods. For example, instead of just kind of leaving it at mass, maybe limit it just to pine straw or some type of garden center or garden or agricultural use. Staff would also like the board to consider limiting it to the type of business that would be allowed. So one example could be it would be limited to just like a hardware store or maybe some other uses. potentially limiting the total number of trailers that are allowed on site. That can be done either through like looking at the building size or even potentially limiting based off the lot size. And then there is one current example in town. It would be located Lowe's Hardware. They currently have tractor trailers on site that are enclosed in their garden center. Jay, did you have a Google Maps image of the Lowe's?
Yeah, I see Commissioner Miller has a question. I can pull that imagery up while you maybe perhaps answer that question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a conflict in the statements in this text amendment. My question is, why not side and rear of the building? Who wants it? Who wants a 48 or a 53-foot trailer in the front? The current text in the bottom in red, the original text, refers to side and rear, but the top under proposal solution says trailers are limited to front and rear. And so the proposal solution of front and rear, I disagree with. In the red text, it says side and rear only. I would support that. I recommend that it stay that way. We can debate the time frame or how many days per year, but I don't want to debate the location. I think side and rear is appropriate. Thank you.
So let me clarify that for a second. So the red text in the proposal, it does limit it, or right now it does limit it to the side and the rear. In the staff memo, if I put that it was allowed in the front yard, that was a mistake. Currently, what our current ordinance allows is it doesn't distinguish between where the trailers are allowed. So currently they could potentially be located in the front yard or the front of the building.
I would support the side and rear, but not the front.
I discussed this with staff and having worked in the private sector for a few decades. I know that one of the biggest causes of waste is excessive moving stuff around. And I think it's incredibly wasteful to have a tractor trailer full of pine straw and then go to all the effort to unload it and stack it off somewhere else and then have people buy it and, just moving and no real value added there. So I support allowing these. I did suggest, and maybe staff can give us a recommendation, that we limit, as Darren said, what can be sold from these trailers. We certainly don't want washing machines or TVs or something like that sold out of them. So it should be limited, I believe, to agricultural products. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Commissioner Urban.
I would agree. I do have a little unintended consequence issue here, and I don't know if Darren and staff has worked through that, but I mean, the B1CD district is pretty extensive, and I don't want this to open up Pandora's box. So I think we need to vet it from limiting the number of trailers, potentially limiting the product. I'd be willing to go to 180 days in lieu of 120. I just don't see people rushing to the table. This is the first one that's come to our attention about year-round trailer storage. If we were doing year-round, I may want to sort of swing this in a direction of the way Lowe's does it. I think Lowe's has it quarantined behind fencing or a separate yard. So I would, if we went in that direction for a full year, I would tend to sort of want to promote something that Lowe's is doing, which is very, very nice, aesthetically pleasing, and is out of sight, out of mind. So I think there's a couple areas we need to vet, and just see where the planning board goes with this as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Whitley, did you have a question, sir?
I did. I know in time past, there was a trailer right in front of the garden and that had straw and pine needles because I bought some out of there, and on the side too. So I'm really, I have no problem with a trailer if it's going to be limited, like we were saying, to garden some kind of pine needle straw or something like that seasonal. And I'm sort of with John too. I could go 180 days. I don't have no problem with that. But also, I did like the image that Lowe's had, where he had their trailer sort of fenced in as well too. So I could go along with that as well too, if that's what it's going to be, just for seasonal agricultural type deliveries.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
I think there may be, if we start talking about building fencing around the trailers, there may be unintended consequences against some of the smaller businesses in town. And that would concern me. I'm thinking about places that sell straw for horses or, pet food in general. Not that I see PetSmart putting a tractor trailer outside, but I do think there are some smaller businesses that use tractor trailer, just the backs of them, for hay or for animal feed.
Commissioner McCool.
Just kind of go along with what Larry said. I like the way Lowe's has done it. It's very aesthetically pleasing. I think I'd be in favor of 180 days, as long as it's on the side or in the back or in the rear. So I don't think it should be right out in front. I don't think that would be very aesthetically pleasing.
Question for Jay or Darren. Does Lowe's leave those trailers there year round, or is it limited to 180 days?
So we were having that conversation this morning. I believe we've got to go back and look at that zoning from 20 years ago. I want to say the intent, and Charlie, that's probably too much to ask of you to remember that conversation. I believe they're year round.
I think so.
Inside the
I
garden
think they
center
are as well. I don't recall them ever not being there. So could be wrong, but it seems like about every time I go there, when I'm in that parking lot, I see the trailers there.
Yeah, I think maybe bringing it within the confines of the garden center was the solution, but I'd have to go back and look at the minutes.
So I did exchange an email with Ms. Good, and regarding the terminology, it just says goods, and they were copying the previous verbiage, but I do think that's kind of wide open when it just says goods. So I think perhaps staff could recommend a tightening up of that language. Are there any other questions or comments for Darren? Commissioner Whitley?
In light of Lowe's going year round, and I would like to do the same thing. I would like to be equal to, if they keep the trailers there year round, then I would in favor year round.
Commissioner Bland?
Isn't there a feed store that's sort of over there near Butler High School behind the Americana restaurant? They use trailers there to store grain and hay and all kinds of other stuff, I believe. What would be the effect of this on them?
So that's a great question, Commissioner Bland. We've actually been working with that property owner for some time. That is a zoning violation as of today. They've got multiple trailers that are stored in their side yard, and unfortunately, they're only zoned B1. So going back to Commissioner Garner's comment, or Mayor Pro Tem, sorry, if you want to expand this to cover more small businesses, that's certainly something the board could entertain as well. But again, you're going to want to think about that number of trailers. That's obviously a much smaller building. I mean, that's probably a 5,000 square foot building plus or minus. But I think some excellent points have been brought up if you want to expand it. That we have discussed a text amendment with that business owner for quite some time.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Whitley that whatever Lowe's has, we should be equal and fair to Home Depot. I do a lot of business with Lowe's. To my recollection, their 1 or 2 trailers are on the outside right of the garden center, but they're enclosed in a visual fence and they don't really move. They just unload from the front, etc. I also do buy from Neighborhood Feed on Moore Road, the mentioned feed store. I don't remember seeing trailers, but I will look harder next time. I thought that they enclosed the barn and storage area on the right that used to be part of the fun go-kart area, and that's where they pull my bags of corn and stuff for feeding the deer out of. But I will look closer. But whatever we do for Lowe's, we should do for Home Depot, in all fairness.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Commissioner Urban.
Is there any reason, I don't know of any small business in the B1 CD, because that's conditional use and these are bigger shopping centers, but is there any reason we can't come up with a hybrid that maybe 180 days, unenclosed facility, and if you want to go full year, you could do like Lowe's does and do a full enclosure, and so you get to pick and choose from that aspect of what benefits you and your return on investment. I think Lowe's does a commendable job, but if Home Depot doesn't want to go there, I'd rather not give them the full year like Lowe's has, but I'm willing to compromise a little bit on the time.
Good idea.
Are there any, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Again, I want to be cautious about doing that because I think it would hurt the smaller businesses like Neighborhood Feed.
Neighborhood Feed is not in the B1 CD. These are only B1 SCD districts.
I guess I'm assuming that in the future, if they ask for a rezoning, that could get complicated.
We're only talking about B1 SCD right now.
Jay, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I was going to say B1 SCD is limited to developments of 100,000 square feet or more. So we would potentially need, if you want to expand this to B1, we would need to work with the applicant to modify the text amendment in which districts are affected by the new language. And Charlie, that was submitted as I'm sorry, Mayor, that was submitted as a text amendment for B1 SCD. We're tinkering with this part of the code. Do you see any issue with amending which district the text amendment applies to?
I do, because it was mentioned in the, I believe in the notice that it's a B1 SCD conditional change to the district. So it's limited to the B1 SCD in this application.
All right. So regarding, we'll put aside the other business, but if that's the direction you want staff to go in the future with some of the smaller businesses, we could certainly do that in a separate action.
But we can address their concerns under another item, I guess. Are there any questions or comments from the planning board? And I can only see Tom, so.
I'm here.
Hearing none. There you go, Mike. I see it. Okay. Not seeing any questions from the planning board. So the public will also have 24 hours to submit comments by email to matthews@matthewsnc.gov.
You may want the applicant to have a presentation.
Yeah, I was going to do that next.
Sorry.
Or the public can call 704-708-1222. So the applicant, I see Ms. Good is here. Would you like to give a presentation or address these comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, commissioners, and members of the planning board. My name is Laura Good. Again, I am with Parker Poe, and my business address is 301 Fayetteville Street, Raleigh, North Carolina. And I am here on behalf of the applicant, Home Depot, to discuss the requested changes to allow for removal of the 120-day time limit on the outdoor sale of goods from a semi-truck trailer in conjunction with a permanent business in the B1 SCD zoning district. I also have on the line with me this evening a couple of folks from Home Depot, Ibelis, Guadalupe, and Fernando Santiago, the store manager, in case you have any questions, as well as Jordan Corbett with Kimley Horn. I did want to just touch on a few things. Darren did a great job of giving the overview of our proposed text amendment. As he mentioned, this does kind of come after our recent site plan changing conditions approval that you approved back in September. That site plan did allow for semi-trailers to be parked along the side of the garden area for outdoor sales of goods, including pine straw and hay, which is the primary use right now by Home Depot. And currently the UDO does allow for this type of sale, but it's limited to 120 days. And so the problem with this 120-day limitation is that this is a highly demanded type of merchandise, specifically the pine straw and hay. It's demanded 360 days a year, not just 120 or not just 180. It's something that Matthews residents consistently request for throughout the year. And so that's why we're asking for the ability to have this year-round sale of this type of goods to better serve the needs in this high demand product. Over the past year, the pine straw and hay sales from these trailers has represented over a quarter of all mulch sales for the store. And then there's this intangible impact that it has on the rest of the business as well, because Home Depot prides itself on being a one-stop shop for its customers. So people are not having to go to one store to get their pine straw and hay. They're not having to go to another to get their hardware needs met. So if we are not allowed to provide this type of sale year-round, it's not going to only impact the sales for that merchandise. It's also going to have the ripple effect of impacting all the other sales that would be associated with that, because folks just may not come to Home Depot anymore. They may go somewhere else where they can get all of their needs met in one trip. Especially important in a time of COVID when people are trying to limit their exposure as they're going out and getting their necessary items from the store. Before submitting this text application, we did submit our proposed language to staff and got their feedback. And so the version that you are seeing before you tonight is a version that reflects the suggested changes by staff prior to filing, which namely was to make this removal of the 120-day time period only applicable in the B1 SCD zoning district. So again, we're taking the exact same language that's already in the code, but only removing that 120-day limitation just in the B1 SCD district, and also adding that additional language in saying that the location would be limited to the side and rear, which is not currently in the code for any other zoning district. So we did take those comments and we added those to our amendment. And as you can see from some of the other zoning districts or jurisdictions nearby that do allow for this type of sale from this type of trailer, they don't have the same time limits. So removing this time limit would be, in keeping with some of the other jurisdictions that are your neighbors. A couple of things I wanted to point out in terms of comparisons to Lowe's and Home Depot for the storage of these trailers. Currently, because of the fact that there's this limitation of 120 days on the outdoor use of these trailers, Home Depot actually has moved them inside their garden center to a covered area. The problem is that the site for them requires them to then get rid of other merchandise that was previously stored in that location in the garden center. So in the enclosure in the garden center, they're having to choose between being able to provide this merchandise or provide the other merchandise. So it's really kind of been a catch-22 for them. And so being able to move this outside of the garden center, again, will not only allow for the sale of this merchandise, but the other merchandise that they've had to move or not have stored there. Also, I would also like staff's input, and maybe this is a conversation we can have later, but I worry about the unintended consequences of having another enclosure added to the side of the garden center. One, from a perspective of required setbacks that there may be for fencing. This is getting towards the northern property line of Home Depot's parcel. I also don't know what impact this would have on our approved site plan that allowed us to have these trailers and did not. When we had that conversation, there was not this concern raised for having to have the structure be enclosed or have fencing around it. And so I would not want this to be a situation where we would have to then come back to you and ask for another change in conditions to allow for fencing or an enclosure to the extent that that would be allowed, given the setbacks. Here on the site, we could certainly show the site plan to you again, but where this is proposed to go on the Home Depot location, again, because it's on the side of the building, it is an alleyway, so it is not going to be visible for any of the other tenants in the Matthews Festival Shopping Center. The property to the north, which is the closest property line, is a Duke Power substation. So again, by having the ability to have these trailers outside 360 days a year, it would not substantially detract from the aesthetics that I know is very important to this town. And we want to make sure we have an attractive product, but we feel by putting it on the side of the building, by the site plan that's already been approved, we've accomplished that. So in summary, this is a small change to an existing use that's already allowed by the town in the zoning district, just to allow us to better serve customers' demands. Will allow us to continue to be a strong contributor to the tax revenues for the town and a strong source of employment for the town. And I thank you for your time and consideration of this request. I am here to answer any questions. Sorry, two other things I wrote down in my notes is that in terms of limitation of the number of trailers, we would, I think staff had previously suggested 2 to 3, or do it based on building size. I think we would be amenable to that so long as we could get a 2 to 3 minimum there. 2 is what we have planned for right now. And that's it. So again, thank you for your time this evening, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from the Board of Commissioners for Ms. Good?
Mr. Mayor, before you get to the question, may I make one comment?
Sure.
This is a text amendment that applies to all B1 SCDs. We shouldn't be looking at it as a site-specific text amendment.
Thank you. I have a question for Jay. Jay, you and I discussed possibly making this more specific on the terminology where it says goods. Do you have a suggestion for that?
I think Mr. Hallman earlier mentioned sale of agricultural products. I think something along those lines, landscaping materials, something going that direction, I think makes a lot of sense to avoid your example of selling washing machines from the semi trucks.
And Ms. Good, would you be amenable to that?
Yes, I think if we could make it the more general, garden or agricultural products that are ancillary to the garden center, I think that would be certainly helpful. Right now, all we do is pine straw or hay, but I would hate for it to foreclose, based on future changes in businesses and how things are delivered. But I think we would be amenable to that.
Okay. Very good. Commissioner Miller. You're muted.
Thank you. I'm sorry. This may qualify as a silly question, but is a Christmas or a Festivus tree an agricultural product then? You're not going to grow it at home, but I see them in trailers and pulled out and roped.
I personally wouldn't have any problem with that. I just didn't want to see hardware or washing machines or something like that sold out of a trailer. That's, I think anything agricultural, I think that from my perspective, that would, I don't know what others think, but I think Christmas trees would be fine.
I do too. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the planning board? Not seeing any. I'm really surprised at the amount of conversation we've had over this item. It seemed like a pretty simple request, but Mr. Foster.
Just one quick question. Are we going to be specific in this to state that whatever's in the trailers can only be sold, like home products, yard products, or would those trailers located in the space that we're talking about also be able to be used strictly for storage, like for appliances?
Good question.
Not sure who wants to answer that.
I would like to mention our ordinance does differentiate between the storage of goods and the sale of goods. I don't have it with me, but we do have separate definitions for those. The sale of goods, they're items that are intended to be sold in a retail manner, and I believe the storage of goods was anything that's just held for a 48-hour period that's there temporarily.
Is that satisfactory, Mr. Foster?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll remind that the public, again, has 24 hours to submit comments by email to matthews@matthewsnc.gov or by phone at 708-1222. I think that will do it for this one. It will go. Jay, when is our next planning board meeting?
You put me on the spot. Tuesday, the 24th of November.
That's Mike. Okay, so this will go then and then come back to us at our first meeting in December, correct?
Correct.
So I'll turn now to the town clerk. Do we have the applicant for zoning application 2020-717 with us yet?
They're not quite ready, Mr. Mayor. So if the board could vote to continue the public hearing for 1 hour, you can do that and then move on to the next items on the agenda.
Does that require a motion, Mr. Buckley?
Yes, it does.
It does.
Okay. I can make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we continue the public hearing as we await the petitioner of 2020-717 to get ready.
Second.
You need a time specific, Commissioner Miller. Yes, that's fine.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what did you say for a time? 1 hour?
If that's acceptable, if you'd like me to revise it, I'd be happy.
1 hour should be sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who seconded that?
Second. 1 hour.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Miller, a second from Commissioner Urban. We'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So we will revisit that in an hour or so. My clock says it's 7:48, so sometime around 7:45 we'll see if they're ready to go. Right now, I will entertain a motion to reconvene our regular meeting.
So moved.
Motion from Commissioner Whitley, a second by Commissioner McCool. Roll call vote. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. We now stand reconvened in our regular meeting. We'll move on to agenda item number 10A, receive a report from the planning board. Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone, Board of Commissioners, Planning Board members. I have the Planning Board report from our meeting on October 27th, 2020. Members of the Planning Board were given an amended list of amenity offerings and the applicant's agreement to increase the text amendment from 5 to 8 offerings. I did want to specify that those offerings are yet to be determined, but they will need to be approved by Planning Board and Board of Commissioners before finalized. The Planning Board unanimously voted to recommend the text amendment request for approval. The request was found to be consistent with the Matthews land use plan as it allows an increased diversity of housing options within the town of Matthews, and the request was found to be reasonable because there's an existing definition of independent living facilities, but no corresponding listing in the permitted use table. Item number 2 is rezoning application 2020-718 Premier Holdings, which is the Harley-Davidson dealership at 9205 East Independence. Change of conditions, including facade renovation and the addition of an outdoor stage. Planning Board reviewed the change of conditions request and reviewed the soundstage height and location. The change of conditions request that included the facade renovation and the addition of an outdoor stage was recommended for approval by the planning board. The request is found to be consistent with the Matthews land use plan as it supports the economic viability of the existing business in a retail center. The request was found to be reasonable because accessory uses are permitted in the original conditioning zoning criteria, as are special events. The vote on that was also unanimous by the planning board. Third item, public improvement variance of the Rice Road mixed-use development. With the possible delay of the North Carolina DOT project, U-2509, which is the Independence Boulevard improvements, members of the planning board reviewed the request for 2 public improvement variances for the Rice Road mixed-use development. Discussion was held about the future road projects and their impact on the site, and the future of the road products. Basically, the information that we received from Mr. Camp was those projects are very much in the air due to funding issues at this time, and there is no specific date on the table as far as when any of those improvements will take place. Members recommended approval to eliminating the requirements to construct curb and gutter along Sam Newell Road, with a condition that the applicant construct a 10-foot pedestrian path along Sam Newell Road outside of the future NCDOT project area. The applicant is also required to conform to the town of Matthews design standard for the sidewalk and planting strip along Rice Road, specifically in the cul-de-sac, since it looks like it could be a considerable amount of time before the road is pushed through Rice Road as part of that project. Are there any questions about that one before I move on? We kind of took apart the public improvement variance based on the fact that we didn't want to have a lot of money spent by the applicant to construct curb and gutter in an area that once the DOT started their project would certainly tear up. Our goal was to get a sidewalk or pedestrian path there, have the applicant pay for it, and have it far enough away from any future development along Rice Road that it wouldn't have to be destroyed and rebuilt later.
Good.
Okay. Item number 4 is for information only. The members of the planning board reviewed 2 administrative amendments that would be required for the Rice Road mixed-use development. The first would delete a portion of the 50-foot landscape buffer so that a road could be constructed for the UDO MUD district requirement. And the second would allow removal of the berm along Sam Newell Road. The planning board voted unanimously to approve both of these requests. These requests did not need to come to the full board of commissioners. And last item, just information. Planning board made the decision to continue our board meetings through the Zoom platform at least through the month of November. Okay. Are there any questions?
All right. Good report. Thank you, Mike. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to 10B, planning and zoning related actions. B1, zoning application 2020-715, Williams Business Properties, 1700 Weddington Road. R15 to R-12 MFCD on that certain property located at 1700 Weddington Road and further designated as tax parcel 22729-101. This was deferred from our October 12th meeting. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the planning board, and members of the Board of Commissioners. Yes, this was continued from last month, and it's taken it's changed a little bit. So let me go through some of the changes. The original project was supposed to be 131 units. That has been reduced to 98 units. They have reduced the number of apartment buildings from 4 to 1. And the units per acre was reduced from 7.79 to 5.82. The leasing and office amenities remain, and they have 10.94 acres of provided open space. So they have tweaked it a little bit further. They are looking to do 70 townhome units, not an increase in the 98, but just an increase in the mix. A 7-foot perimeter sidewalk is to be reduced to 6 feet. That goes along with an overall reduction in the impervious area of the project, including the reduction of parking spaces from 243 to 188. The developer agrees to provide dedication of land to Mecklenburg County for a future greenway. And there was a pedestrian entryway from South Trade that has been removed, also as a part of the reduction in the impervious area. The one outstanding issue is that the PCO plan has not been approved for the new site design. It is a little different, but we think there shouldn't be too many problems based on the small changes that have been made to the site plan. Planning board recommended approval of the revised 98-unit site plan on a vote of 5-2 at their last meeting. And staff believes that the reduction of the impervious surface is an improvement for the project. However, it comes at a design cost. The redesign of the internal circulation, replacement of parallel parking with head-in parking, and reduction of townhome clusters from 21 to 17 buildings creates a project that is it's just not quite as unique as the original or the second iteration of this project. However, that being said, staff recommends approval of the zoning application because during the review stage, staff asked that the project density be reduced, and the developer has complied with that request. They have the applicant is here this evening, and they have requested a deferral for another month to further work on the design of the plan. And if the board does not wish to grant approval of the project, it's recommended that they allow withdrawal of the application or deferral in order that the property not have to wait 1 year before another proposal may be submitted.
Thank you, Rob. Before we go to the applicants, are there any questions from the board for Rob? Okay, seeing none, I don't know if Mr. Levinson or Mr. Carmichael would like to say anything.
Thank you, Mayor Higdon. Jack, did you want to speak or?
John, I'm going to let you speak on our behalf.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Mayor Higdon, members of the board. You guys are familiar. I do have a PowerPoint that shows the adjustments to the plan in a little more detail. We made those adjustments, if I recall correctly, prior to the planning board meeting. And then we also had a follow-up community meeting to share the revised plan with interested parties. That meeting was well attended. I'm not saying that we changed any minds, but it was well attended, and we provided a lot of information, the information on the revised plan. We also provided information from the traffic engineer on the traffic study. You will recall from the public hearing that there are a lot of questions from folks about the traffic study. But as Rob indicated, the density has been reduced by 33 units from 131 to 98. The minimum number of townhome units has been increased from 37 to 70. So, and there's only one multifamily building now located on the site, and it's in the middle portion of the site. So it's really, for all extensive purposes, a townhome community. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. This is, if you can see I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but you can see the one multifamily building in the center of the site, right by the amenity. The rest of the units would be townhome buildings. There would be a significant amount of the property that would be dedicated to the county for the greenway. There's an abundance of open space, and there'd be an abundance of tree save as well. This is the area of the site that would be dedicated to the greenway. So as I was saying, for all extensive purposes, it's a townhome community. Now, it is a for-lease townhome community, but nevertheless, in terms of the the actual units. They would be townhomes, townhome units. What Lat Purser is requesting is that there be another 1 month deferral to allow the applicant to explore a further reduction in density and a further revision to the product mix. And that further study would frankly center on that remaining multifamily building. You may ask why a further study would be needed, because there are impacts to the developer's ability to develop the site by the elimination of that multifamily building and the replacement of that building with townhomes, which results in a further reduction in density. So that's the request, Mayor Higdon and members of the board, for 1 month deferral. Short of that, we would respectfully request that the application be approved. As Rob indicated, is recommended for approval by the planning staff, and the planning board recommended approval by a 5-2 vote. If the board is not inclined to defer it or inclined to approve the request, then we would respectfully request that the applicant be allowed to withdraw the petition so that the property owner is not precluded from pursuing another rezoning within the prohibited time period. But we appreciate your patience. I know y'all you've been considering this project for some time, getting a lot of feedback, and we do appreciate your patience and your willingness to listen to us. Jack, is there anything I need to add to that?
I would just say, thank you, John. I would just say that upon approval for deferment, again, we will look at the density, we will look at the product use, and we will look at the layout, referencing comments from the planning department in terms of, I don't remember the exact words, but in terms of layout between the current plan and the original plan. Thank you.
Any questions for either Mr. Carmichael or Mr. Levinson? Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I've told most people I know that it is zoned single family, and it's smack dab in the middle of single family on all 3 or 4 sides. I realize it's also along a creek and that some of it is in the floodplain and it's challenged, but I think that when it comes to referring to some as multifamily and some as townhomes is a little bit of a walnut shell game. They're all apartments, and I would support single family in there, but I will not support any kind of apartments, or as you refer to them, townhomes. And I would prefer a withdrawal, but I don't know how other commissioners feel.
Commissioner McCool.
I agree with Jeff. The townhomes are still inherently apartments at the end of the day. So excuse me. I think that this is best suited for single family. Like Jeff said, single families all around it. We've talked about traffic. I've heard from a lot of constituents about a fear of traffic. I think if we put townhomes, as you would refer to them as, it's going to increase traffic. It's going to put a further strain on our schools. So I would suggest withdrawal on this. Even if that apartment building was taken out, I'd still would not be in favor of it.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners care to make a comment? Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
I'll let Commissioner Urban go. He had his hand up too.
Fair enough. Commissioner Urban.
I really appreciate Lat Purser making an effort on this site. And I think that great minds think alike, although Jay and company are a little smarter than I am when it comes to planning. Their comments are very similar to mine, is that the site plan has been greatly weakened by the actual reduction in density to some degree, but it lost its placemaking, it's lost its sense of community. It really turned into a more traditional townhome type product. And as I've always said, you have to knock my socks off. And it started with the original proposal. With the removal of the apartments, I think it was going in the right direction. I think we The problem is we continue to kick the can down the road. And I'm not saying this is the right place or the right location or whatever, but I get the emails about we need affordability. Well, here's an opportunity for some level of affordability. If it goes to single family homes, very few of us are going to be able to afford those homes, period. That being said, though, some of the other comments I got, and I have to sort of vent on these things, is I got the us versus them issue with apartment dwellers. 27% of the homes and residences in Matthews are rental properties. So every subdivision has a rental property in it. And I'm kind of, annoyed by the constant emails about it's those kind of people. And so I just feel sad that we're still here talking about those kind of people when we're talking about rental properties. But coming back to the main piece, if the board does, I'd be all for a deferral if we could see some movement, if the board was willing to do that. But I'm reading tea leaves that they're not there. And so I'll be at the deferral, I mean, at the pleasure of the board where it wants to go, but I really see the tea leaves sort of saying they don't want to approach this thing. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I can go either way. I'd be more than happy to entertain, see what they come back with in 30 days. But if everybody's still going to be entrenched where they're at, I would tend to tell Jack and John to look at the letting it go and letting some other opportunities come down the pike.
Thank you, Commissioner Urban. Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
I'd like to kind of continue on that note that, I live next to a townhome community, and although it was built to be sold as individual units over the years, it's largely been rental, but that doesn't mean people are any less committed or invested in Matthews when they live there. And many people have been renting for the entirety of it being there over a decade. I guess largely I don't see these townhomes and their price point as filling a need with the apartments that we do have coming up. And it would put a burden on the schools. It would put a burden on the roads. And I think that's our biggest concern. And the biggest feedback is that the bridge project is never seeming to end. And if you came in and made the same proposal after the bridge were finished and the road were reconfigured, people may have a different understanding of what traffic is at that corner. But at this point, there's so much bitterness over that intersection. That's something that I can't get past. I can't feel good about putting more cars on the road right there with that density. I do hope that you could take this same project and find another place for it in Matthews, somewhere closer to transit, so that we don't have those extra cars on the road. I think that getting it somewhere near the bus line or the future Silver Line, it could be an amazing project for Matthews. So I would support withdrawing the proposal.
Commissioner McCool.
Just wanted to clarify what I said. I have no problem with rental units. Like Renee said, if this were in a different area, I probably would be in support of it. But because of all the factors that we've gone over, it just doesn't work at this spot. Like Renee said, if it was near transit, if it was in a different spot, it may be great, but in this particular location, it does not work. It should be single family.
Okay, would any other commissioner care to make a comment? Commissioner Whitley.
Well, I think this is either the third project that we've seen in this plot here, and I too want to commend Jack and John in bringing it down, and I think it's a great improvement. There's a lot of thought went into this area, but just like all the rest of the commission, we've got 100 citizens don't want it there. And that's a lot, and I don't think it'll pass. Personally, I don't. But I would tend to withdraw and see what you can come back later. But at some point, what do we want in this area? What what will fit in that area. If it's not going to be in as single homes, and it's half of the property is in a flood area, so the developers won't keep bringing this back. If that's what the neighborhood don't want there, then what do we want an area that will be beneficial with the new road and that connectivity right there between the two roads? So I would think that would be something that maybe we can look at. What do you want in there so the developer won't just keep coming back, because it's evident they don't want apartments or townhomes in that area.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion, and I'd like to ask Charlie a question, please. Charlie, if I make a motion to allow them to withdraw, should I refer to the denial language of land use plan, inconsistent, things like that?
No, you don't need to do that if you're going to allow them to withdraw.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to allow the petitioner to withdraw the petition, in that we want Mr. Williams to be able to sell the property. He has his land rights as well, but this is just not what we feel is the right project for this location. But we don't want to hold him to not be able to remarket it under a different use.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Miller, a second from Commissioner McCool, and I did want to weigh in with my opinion on this project as well. A couple points that were, I think, already brought up by others, but the first one is I've been an elected official for 7 years, and I don't think I've gotten more letters against a project since I've been an elected official than this one. So it's very clear that the adjacent homeowners and people who live in the area, who by the way, I'm one of those people, and I can vouch for the absolutely pre-COVID traffic of just being a complete nightmare. Just unbelievable. I've said before, I've worked for a couple of decades at Combraco, which is about 2.5 miles from my house, and it's taken 45 minutes to an hour to drive to work. I figured out I could walk there faster than driving. So traffic is really horrendous. I know the traffic studies have come back that said the impact would not be too great, but really any more at that location of any substance, 183 parking places, conceivably, 100 plus more vehicles, it's already just undrivable. So I would not support this as well. And so I would support allowing the applicant to withdraw. Is there any other comments or questions anybody would like to say before I call for the vote? All right, seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so that passes unanimously. I want to echo what Commissioner Miller said. We certainly hope for the Williams family that this piece of property can be sold and developed in some other manner as quickly as possible. So thank you, Mr. Carmichael. Thank you, Mr. Levinson, and we'll move on. Look at item 10B2, zoning application 2020-716, text amendment to change the text of the Unified Development Ordinance, creating new section 155.506.16A to allow independent living facilities as a permitted use in the RI zoning district when associated with a conditional site plan and under prescribed conditions that ensure such facilities have limited applicability and are distinguished from multifamily residential uses. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so this is a UDO text amendment to add independent living facilities to the table of permitted uses. There was some comments during the public hearing about concern over the parking ratio. Staff is comfortable with the proposed parking ratio because there will be fewer individuals living in the independent living facilities than in a regular multifamily development. Additionally, there was concern over the required number of amenities. It was only at 5, which seemed kind of low, and should be raised to at least 8. This was discussed at the planning board, and staff and planning board agree. Planning board unanimously recommended approval of the motion, zoning motion 2020-716, to add independent living facilities to the table of permitted uses, and add prescribed conditions, and to add independent living facilities to the parking requirement table, as amended to increase the number of required amenities from 5 to 8. The applicant is in discussions with the applicant at the planning board, and also with staff. They are okay with increasing the number of required amenities from 5 to 8. And staff recommends approval of the motion 2020-716 as amended to increase the number of required amenities from 5 to 8. I do have a map of the RI district areas in the town. I think it's on page 2 of my memo, Jay. There it is. So this just shows you where the RI districts that are larger than 5 acres are located within the town of Matthews. Most of them are already conditionally zoned, so they're already developed and would have to come back for a change of conditions for independent living facilities anyway. But we do have a few that are straight zoned RI that are greater than 5 acres that would be impacted by this text amendment. Most of these properties are already developed as well. And so we just wanted to show you what areas were would be impacted by the proposed text amendment. And I'd be happy to take any questions from the board, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Have any questions? Commissioner Whitley, do you have a question? Okay. Is it the will of the board that we hear from the applicants as well? Do you want to? They're here, correct? So we have Colin Brown, Brittany Lenz.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. This is Brittany Lenz with Alexander Ricks. I also have Jim Lindsay here representing the petitioner. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. I think that Rob really summed up our text amendment well. We're trying to keep this pretty restricted. It would require a conditional plan, so any senior living facility would have to come in front of you as the board before any approval could be done. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We have agreed to update the amenities to 8, a list of 8 minimum amenities that helps distinguish senior living facilities from, a typical multifamily development. So we're happy to accommodate that request and otherwise can take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Lenz? I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Urban.
I will, for lack of no one raising their hand, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion that we go ahead and approve and recommend this 2020-716 motion for a text amendment, and it's found to be consistent with the Matthews Land Use Plan as follows. It's consistent because it allows an increased diversity of housing options within the town of Matthews. It is reasonable. The text amendment is reasonable because there is an existing definition of independent living facilities, but no corresponding listing in the permitted use table. Oh, and do we have to also mention that the number of amenities was increased?
Yes.
Okay. And we lifted that up to 8, from 5 to 8.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Urban. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second by Mayor Pro Tem Garner. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes, with a clarification, was the parking requirement adjusted in the motion?
Parking was as stipulated by the planning staff.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to item 10B3, zoning application 2020-718 Harley-Davidson to change the existing conditions in that certain BHCD district designated as 9205 East Independence Boulevard, further designated as tax parcel 193-19101, and commonly known as the Harley-Davidson dealership. This was deferred from October 12th. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so during the public hearing, change for zoning conditions, concern was raised over the sound stage for more and more events. In their original conditional zoning notes from 2003, the dealer is limited to 8 events during the year. I did receive an email from the applicant, and they are interested in increasing the number of events from 8 to 12 for 1 per month. And additionally, permitted uses are accessory uses are clearly incidental to the permitted principal use of the structure. Easy for me to say, are on the lot are allowed. The planning board unanimously recommended approval of zoning motion 2020-718, change of conditions for the Harley-Davidson dealership, and staff recommends approval of the zoning motion, change of zoning conditions for 9205 East Independence Boulevard, Premier Holdings Harley-Davidson dealership. And if the board wishes to discuss adding or refining the originally permitted list from 2003, that's something that they can do at this time because it is a change of conditions request.
Okay, is there any questions from the board for Rob? Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I have no trouble with the expanding of the number of events per year. They're a popular location, etc. My question is, it's being recommended to approve by planning board and staff. And it says that the events draw up to 250 people for an event, yet we don't allow our downtown businesses to do the same.
Bob or Jay, you want to respond to that?
So, Commissioner Miller, are you talking about as a result of the COVID?
It's right there on the memo, anticipated attendance in excess of 250 people. Staff and planning board is supporting it.
I can clarify. That is from the original conditional note from 2003. So it is pre-COVID, and the reason for that note on there was because if they did have a large event, off-duty police officer would be required for that many number of people.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Commissioner Miller?
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for Rob? Commissioner Urban.
My preference would be to hold to the number of events that they've listed. I see that there's like dates like January and March that are open, but frankly, I'll be real honest. I live on that side of the town. I'm probably a mile away, and we hear their events. And if you're talking about those months where all the trees are defoliated, it makes it even worse from that standpoint. We really appreciate them being in the community. But at this stage in the game, I think they've listed out what they're planning to hold, and I would just support what they've got recommended on their memo.
Okay, I see that we have Oscar Cabeza here. If anybody has any questions for the applicant, or Oscar, would you like to make a presentation of any kind or say anything?
No, man. The only thing I would like to add is that the owners, I mean, they mentioned that every time they do an event, I mean, they have to pull a permit anyways. They follow the applications to the city, even though they have authorization to do it. They follow all the steps. So they're gonna keep doing it. I mean, they wanna bring some people. I mean, help the community. So, and they wanna keep the rules, follow all the rules. So they're gonna keep doing the same process they've been doing, pulling the permits and following all the rules to get those events approved and done.
Okay, thank you. So would anyone like to make a motion, or did Jeff, you already make one?
I didn't make one. I'm in support of it, though.
Question before.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Well, if, when we're talking about their events and doing one 8 times a year versus 12 times a year, what's the difference in maybe Christopher's having a bike night, in a parking lot full and having a band outside, and Harley Davidson having an event? Why are they restricted to 8 versus a restaurant being able to do the same?
Good question.
That's a good question. Thank you. In the original 2003 conditional zoning, that is, those were added as conditions, that they would only be allowed to have those 8 events per year.
But a restaurant in the same quarter would not be restricted?
Myself? Yeah, because it's not a condition of their, it was a condition of their rezoning, and a restaurant would probably not have those same conditions.
For that reason, I would suggest we allow 12. I feel like would be a fair motion. I mean, I live surrounded by restaurants that have ends at night, and they stop by 10 o'clock. It's not disruptive. I mean, I guess it was pretty disruptive when we had a young child, but or a baby. But I don't know that going from 8 to 12 is going to be that big of a deal.
Commissioner Miller.
Are there hours of operation for these events where they don't go too late?
Not as a part of the conditional zoning, but as a part of the noise permit, I believe there are.
What is that, Rob? Is that to 10 o'clock?
I'm sorry, I don't know the details of the noise permit.
Generally, it's 11 o'clock.
Again, I would entertain a motion, either 8 or 12, or a motion of some sort. Commissioner Miller.
Before I make a motion, I'd like to ask Oscar a question. Oscar, would you be understanding if we tried to limit it to 9 or 10 p.m. band stops?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I mean, every time one of these events occur, depending on the kind of the event, I mean, there's some events that are going to be held during the day, and there's only a couple that are going to be held at night. But every time those events are going to be happening, they're going to have to apply for a sound permit. So I guess they have to follow, I mean, and the owner knows they will follow the rules or whatever that permit for that specific event is issued for. So they will be okay with it.
I make a motion that we recommend approval of zoning motion 2020-718, change of zoning conditions for 9205 East Independence Boulevard, Premier Holdings Harley Davidson dealership, and allow them to hold 12 events a year with the idea that any bands would turn off their amplified music at 10 p.m.
I'll second that.
Let's make that a motion to approve, not a motion to recommend approval. You are approving it.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
And I'll amend that as second as well.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Miller and a second from Commissioner Whitley. Roll call vote. Commissioner Bland.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
No.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that passes 6-1 with Commissioner Urban standing in opposition. Move on to item 10B.
I believe I missed it, but did Commissioner Miller's motion have it complied with the land plans and it's reasonable?
It will.
I don't believe you.
Oh, we did.
And that it's consistent with the zoning changes and conditions that are consistent, as it supports the economic viability of the business in a retail center, and that it's reasonable in that this change in conditions are reasonable uses are in the original conditional zoning criteria as are special events.
I'll second that again.
Let's take the vote again with a reasonableness clause added. I can't even say that word. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Nay.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So again, that passes 6-1 with Commissioner Urban in opposition. Moving on to item 10B4, public improvement
Mr.
variance.
Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sorry. The representatives from our previously deferred public hearing are here. If you would like to move to that item next.
Can we finish up our planning and development business? Is that okay?
Charlie, would that be okay?
You can't, because it was continued for 1 hour, so we really need to wait till that quarter till time period.
Thank you.
So let's move on to 10B4, public improvement variance. And I believe on this one, this is for 1935 Rice Road. Commissioner Urban will be asking for recusal because he's involved with this, correct, sir?
That is correct. As it stands, like I've indicated before, my firm has been involved in assisting them with this development.
Okay, remind me, Mr. Buckley, we need a vote to recuse.
He recuses himself. The board only excuses, so he's recused, so you do not need a vote.
Let me make a note of that so I remember next time. So we stand with Commissioner Urban recused. And Jay, would you like to talk about this one?
Sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Mr. Foster gave you an update from Planning Board earlier, part of their report was a recommendation on these public improvement variances that are required for you to take a vote here in just a moment on 1935 Rice Road. Items 1 through 3 are a summary of the request, and of course, it's to delete the curb and gutter from Sam Newell, delete sidewalk from Sam Newell, and delete the requirement to extend Rice Road. And the applicant does go into further detail and that they wish to not be required to reconstruct the sidewalk and planting strip to current standards. And I would appreciate an assist from Mr. Foster. I don't know if he's still on the call or not, but I believe the planning board, there was a lot of discussion that went on at the very end of the meeting. I believe what planning board wanted to see was that they still wanted to see that sidewalk and planting strip reconstructed on the Rice Road extension frontage. That's what I recall seeing in the minutes.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also, you saw in that recommendation that planning board wanted to see the side path constructed. That was part of the recommendation as well. I did run this by Susan and CJ. They were comfortable with this allowing the curb and gutter to be removed due to the uncertainties with 2509. So staff does recommend approval of the public improvement variance in advance of the next item on the agenda. And I am happy to answer any questions you have at this time. I believe the applicant is here as well, if you have any questions for them.
Do we have any questions?
I think, do I have a second?
For either Jay or Mr. Carmichael?
Sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
I have a question about the Rice Road extension, and that's considered part of the NCDOT project. Is that correct? If it goes through?
That's correct. The DOT was planning to go ahead and connect the cul-de-sac to Sam Newell, and they would have installed a traffic signal, and as well as done some road widening in that area.
In that area, but not to Rice Road. So.
Yeah, so that it would become a four-way intersection there. So Rice Road and Rice Road Extension would connect along this property frontage, and there would be, I believe, Sam Newell would be 4 lanes in that segment as well along this property frontage.
I guess my question is, are we passing on the bill to NCDOT when the developer could be doing this? As you know, generally as a town, we ask the developer to pay for improvements, and with DOT being in dire straits for money, is it a wise request to expect them to foot the bill on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. The original zoning for this area, the board specifically did not want that road connection to occur, and it was cul-de-saced back in the 90s. We've studied it over the years, and there has been discussion of making that connection. But with the road already established on that frontage, my opinion of our code is that we cannot require this developer, because the property has already been partially developed. We cannot require them to make that connection. But that's my interpretation of it.
And one other thing about that connection is that cul-de-sac currently ends right on the other side, obviously, of Rice Road. But there is, from Rice Road down to the end of that cul-de-sac, is probably at least a 15-foot cliff. Major road work would have to be done to ever connect that, to make an intersection of it. I don't know if it's reasonably possible to do it at any time.
Thank you, Mike.
I was very surprised when I actually looked at it and saw what a cliff it was. I don't know how they'd make that connection.
Mr. Carmichael, you have any thing you'd like to present?
I think what we would say is that we are comfortable and appreciate the planning board's recommendation. So the applicant is for the site plan approval and for the public improvement variance is more than willing to construct a 10-foot wide multi-use path along the site's frontage on Sam Newell Road, and would request that the board, respectfully request that the board grant the variance to not require the curb and gutter along the site's frontage on Sam Newell Road. Likewise, the applicant is more than willing to bring the sidewalk and planting strip on Rice Road up to town standards. So really the variance would be to eliminate curb and gutter on Sam Newell Road.
Any questions, comments, or motions?
There's not currently a sidewalk there, right?
There is.
There is?
On Rice Road?
On Sam Newell, I guess is what I was thinking.
No, not on Sam Newell. The applicant would build a new 10-foot wide multi-use path.
But that's directly along the cliff that Mr. Foster was referring to.
Sam Newell? Michael Thieberts, are you on the line? Ms. Carter, I'm waiting for our engineer. Mike? Well, but this must be where the cliff is here at the end of this cul-de-sac, but this is this is where the sidewalk would go.
Michael Thabridge is adjoining. Give him just a minute to get in.
Hi, I think I'm unmuted now. Evening all.
Hey, Mike, did you hear the question from Council Member Garner or Board Member Garner?
Yes, John, I did. It's a very steep drop off from Sam Newell down to the end of Rice Road. But as you work further to the east along, plain east along Sam Newell, it's actually north. The grade catches up. They must have cut, Rice Road down into the side of the hill, but the actual grade from Sam Newell into the site along Sam Newell Road isn't that much. It's workable with a trail connection along that Sam Newell frontage.
And the sidewalk will be located in such a fashion that when and if NCDOT comes and constructs its improvements, they would not have to tear up the sidewalk.
Correct. Yes, there would be we would flatten out the areas and take into account that future widening of Sam Newell to accommodate that. Yeah. Hope that answers your all questions.
Commissioner McCool.
Just want to clarify. So the future widening, the sidewalk would not be affected or in the way? Just want to be sure of my notes.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Would anyone care to make a motion?
Jay, help me, but wouldn't there be two motions, one for the variance and then secondly the site plan approval?
Yes, so the site, we're just doing the public improvement variance now. I've got the site plan as the second item on the agenda.
Just so that they understand, they're just dealing with the variance right now.
Right, and we did not need reasonable and consistency statements for variances, correct?
That's correct.
And or for the site plan approval?
That's correct.
Okay, so I was good on that. So carry on.
Mr. Miller, you're muted, sir.
You're still muted, Jim.
Okay, sorry, everybody. I'll make a motion that we approve public improvement variance allowing the removal of curb and gutter from Sam Newell Road while requiring the construction of a 10-foot side path along the property frontage.
I'll second that motion, property 1935 Rice Road.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Miller, a second from Commissioner Whitley. We'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so that passes 6-0, unanimous. So we'll move on to the next item, the actual site plan approval for 1935 Rice Road. We've already discussed this, but Jay, you want to give it one or two more sentences to not totally confuse us?
Let me try to do, well, does this count as a sentence? So here's the site plan.
One more sentence. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are you trying to get us to 8:47? That's our 1 hour mark.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was kind of pushing for, but.
So real briefly, the only item that staff would add is, we think this is a great site plan. It's a great use for the area. You'll see on this next page, there's some illustrative images of what the buildings look like. I think the applicant's done a good job of providing character images. And of course, it does require individual buildings to come back to the board for approval. However, because the berm on Sam Newell Road was deleted, that area is now going to be very, very visible. And there are, there's a church and some one single family home just across the street. So I think it would be appropriate here to require some language in the plan that maybe references four-sided architecture or buildings that address the street, as well as probably screening of any kind of utility banks or HVAC, condensing units or things of that nature. Because once that road is widened, this is going to have a fairly shallow setback. So this is going to look a lot like, I think if you look at some of the character imagery here with the True Lion building, this is going to look a little bit like North End in downtown. That's the kind of general feel here. This is sort of an area that's walkable from the neighborhoods along Rice Road. So that's the only language I would like to see added as part of the motion. But other than that, staff recommends approval.
Jay, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Aside from Sam Newell being widened and a future multi-use path, there's also going to be a flyover there, correct? But that'll realign itself before Northeast Parkway.
Yeah, that's accurate. The Sam Newell Road will be a bridge over 74, and the Northeast Parkway will actually be reconfigured to become sort of the through movement up to Sam Newell Road. I know it's hard to show without a map. Okay.
But aside from the widening, we also have the realignment due to the bridge being built. Are we taking all that into consideration?
We are. I believe the applicant did have an exhibit that had an overlay of the very draft DOT plan here that showed, I believe it was a 4-lane cross section here. And this development, so to answer your question, they have their setbacks established to reserve space for that additional right of way that's needed. Is that correct, Michael? You've laid it out in that manner?
Yes. Sure. Yes, that's correct. We've looked at their preliminary plans and reflected that in our plans for a right-of-way line.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion approval, site plan approval, 1935 Rice Road mixed use, with the verbiage that they will have some type of screening facing Rice Road on the end of that project as well.
Second.
Jay, does that address your concerns adequately?
And I would also add four-sided architecture and ensure that want to hear from John that the applicant's okay with that additional language.
We can add a note, Jay, that says that the buildings will have four-sided architecture and any HVAC units and mechanical equipment will be screened from the adjacent public streets. Does that address your concern, Jay?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second with those additions.
Okay. From motion from Commissioner Whitley, a second from Commissioner Miller. We'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So that passes unanimously 6-0. Thank you. I think we need to have Mr. Urban rejoin us now. John, are you there? Thank you, Commissioner Urban. Mr. Urban is back with us on unrecused. And I'll now undertake a motion to recess our regular meeting for a public hearing on an application to amend the Unified Development Ordinance and land use map of the town of Matthews.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Whitley. Do we have a second?
So moved.
Second by Commissioner Miller. Take a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that passes unanimously. We'll now consider zoning application, stand in public hearing for zoning application 2020-717 Idlewild Senior Living to change the zoning classification from R15 to RICD on that certain property designated as 9832 Idlewild Road and further designated as tax parcel 193-051-18 to accommodate a senior living facility in the RI zoning district. This was continued from October 12th. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, staff does not have any new information. The applicant is here and has a presentation that they would like to give. But our action is to hold the continued public hearing in order to receive more public comment.
Thank you, Rob. Mr. Mayor, we're here when you're ready.
Go ahead.
One, thank you for accommodating our schedule. We very much appreciate it. Rob, Jay, I don't know who's driving our slides. We have a presentation. We could probably, Jay, fast forward to about slide 15.
Okay, that was a close guess. I was on 14, but okay. Let me pull it up for you.
So I think you all hopefully recall the location. I did have some slides that I'd love to go through again about the land use plan. This is one of those occasions where you open the land use plan and it calls exactly for your use. So we think we're quite consistent with that. I understand early this evening, the text amendment was approved. And so now we're here for the site-specific development plan for the rezoning for the independent living facility. Next slide, please. So that goes over a little bit of the text amendment. If you recall in the text amendment, there's a menu of amenities. In our original hearing, we said 5 of those. The text amendment was approved 8 of those. At the planning board, one of the planning board members asked if this development team knew the amenities they would use. So did want to point out that we have a commitment to 10 of the 12 amenities. Those are listed there. The two that we have not committed to but want to have on the site are the transportation and meal service, both which the team wants to do, but we need to get a little further along in that. But all the others are commitments in our conditional rezoning plan. Next slide. There was at the first hearing, there was some discussion about density and the fact that the density on our site is higher than the average in Matthews. I think the last meeting we did point out, hey, this is apples and oranges comparing senior living to multifamily, and the national standards. If you look at the national averages, an independent living unit, which we're proposing, has about 1.1 resident per unit. A typical multifamily has 1.9. So if you look at the little box we have there in white, we were showing, I think it was reported Matthews's average multifamily is about 12.75 units per acre. We're proposing 18. So that sounds like a larger number. What we wanted to take that a step farther and show you though, but the residents per unit is significantly lower. So even if you compare those, we would have almost 20% fewer residents than your typical multifamily project. So just wanted to remind you of that the density is a bit higher, but we think that the actual number of folks living there will be lower. We've updated our site plan here. Here's an aerial. I'll walk you through that. The next slide will show we've superimposed that area. Next one, Jay. This is the aerial on an aerial photo, so you can see how this relates to the newly developed Lidl site to the north. And a couple things I wanted to point out. This is based on feedback we received at the last hearing. Next slide, Jay. Just a few things to bring to your attention. One, this was the case last time, but you see there is the tree save area up between the building and the street to screen the building, de-emphasize the scale. We talked a little bit about the height last time. The height is still 4 stories, but wanted to point out that from the road, that tree save area will screen that, we think, nicely. We've added a pocket park along Idlewild Road. If you can see on this aerial, I think Lidl's actually done a nice job if you look at their pedestrian streetscape and what they've got going on. So the goal is to kind of bring that down. So you'll see that pink line on our frontage. We're doing a 10-foot multi-use path to really bring that pedestrian experience down, and have put in a pocket park at the location of our site. So even folks that are not living our site, maybe residents for the senior living across the street, can enjoy that. We've got a walking trail connection to the rear of the site where there's going towards the park. You can see that other pink arrow there. And then we have a vehicular and ped connection to the Lidl. So in addition to the 10-foot multi-use path on the frontage, there's a vehicular connection with a handicap accessible pedestrian access point directly to the Lidl. So our residents do not have to walk out on the street if they choose not to, or others could come through that area also. So that connection is there. We've also are prepared to commit to funding of a new crosswalk on Idlewild Road. That was brought to our attention that there's a project for that. So we think that's probably more for others than for us, but we're willing to make that commitment as well. And the other thing, I wanted to show you all the connection points on the site. Commissioner Urban did mention, he asked if we could have a connection to the church. So I wanted to point out we have a vehicular connection to the Lidl. Lidl has a driveway to the rear, so that'll create circulation. We did look at our connection to the church. Our engineers at DRG are on the line. They have penciled these out, and the grades make that very difficult to happen. So we are not showing that on our plan. If someone thinks that's a deal breaker, we're happy to go back and talk through that with you, but there's some real topography challenges on those two connection points to the church. And we do want to point out we will still have the vehicular connection to the Lidl, which then has a vehicular connection to the rear of the site where there can be another connection that can provide connectivity to those parcels behind. So just wanted to show you that we thought through that, and there's some real challenges. Next slide. Did want to confirm, we talked a little bit about transit service. We did confirm there's transit service. It is an express route just north of the site at the Mentworth Commons. So that's really for commuters, so maybe not daily traveling, but there is transit options in place. Next slide. And then I think the meat of, so those issues were brought up, wanted to let you know how we'd address those. The real question was about the conceptual renderings, wanted to see a little meat on the bone. So since then, the design team has come together, put together some updated renderings for you all to look at. And I'm going to turn it over to Jim Lindsay at this point and let him walk through those.
Yeah, good evening. So we have the new updated renderings available and some other architectural or in response to some of the architectural questions that came up, and wanted to make something that was uniquely Matthews and appropriate for Matthews. And some of the things that we're excited about are breaking up the building to be to break up the massing. We have different architectural features doing that, and also colors and materials. And but starting at the roof, where we have a kind of an articulated roof, you'll see that. Perhaps go to the next slide, and maybe just we'll walk through. Again, the next slide. This is the previous slide was from the rear of the site. This is also another rear view. And again, you can sort of see some of the articulated roof that's been added, and the cupola on the top sort of adds another kind of architectural interest. We broke up the massing with different materials. At the very top of the building, we have a board and batten material usage. Then it kind of goes to lap siding, and the colors change. And we have some brick that previously we had a brick all the way at the bottom of the building, but we thought that was maybe a little bit too pedestrian. And there's a concept called dipped in brick. And instead, we are doing it where the brick's going all the way up. Or in the case of right over this, from this angle, it goes almost all the way up. And in other places, it goes all the way up to the top of the building to, again, create some architectural variance and sort of break up the building and make it blend in to the tree save, to the community. If you go to the next slide again, go forward. Although I will point out, well, you can see it from here too, the balconies are also, we've updated the plans to create more, the balconies are more of an open balcony situation, which we think is important, especially, when there's times for coronavirus or who knows what the future holds, but having that outdoor space for senior residents, we think is extremely important into the future. And from here, you can also see, again, you'll see the tree save a little bit better in between the road and the building, the kind of break up, again, the view of the building from the road. And you also see from the top, there's the compressors are on top of the roof and recessed wells. So again, those are out of view from the street or from the pedestrian angle. So with that, I'll turn it over to Colin, but that's a rundown of what we've done with the architecture.
Yeah, I hope that gives you a feel. Last meeting we showed a prototypical example, but this is mocked up for this site. So wanted to show you this view. We don't have a rendering ground level from the street. The idea is most of that is masked by the tree save area, but hopefully you can get a feel for how this relates to the Lidl parcel and whatever else is going on out there. I hope that's addressed the issues that I think that addresses the issues that were raised at the prior hearing, and happy to take questions.
How many questions for the applicant? From either the Board of Commissioners or the Planning Board? Commissioner Urban.
Yeah, I mean, I gave you, Colin, I gave you the text amendment. Now I got to hold you up on this side. Hitting elevations at, I don't know what time this morning on the day of the petition hearing is tough. I mean, I would have had better time to review this information. I would have liked to get it in a timely fashion. I'm surprised Jay didn't run the riot act to you. Even though we're under COVID, I like to get my materials ahead of time. And so I'm only reacting to this, and you may get more comments after the planning board looks at it, but the lack of elevations until the last moment really threw me for a loop. Let's start with the site plan. I think regardless, the pink connection needs to be labeled for future connection. You got to remember that the person on the other side is going to meet you halfway. They could probably do some things topographically to mediate that connection. So I'd rather have something dotted in that says future. And if it's unreasonable, then you go back to the board then, and the board says, yeah, you're right, you can't do it. But I'd rather have it here today, and so we have it for the potential of the future. So that's my item number one. Item number two is there's just a few technical issues here on the design of the building. The are the porches pervious or impervious?
They're pervious.
Yeah, they'll be pervious on the balcony level.
Okay. So it's 5/4 board decking. You could drop a nickel through it. So okay. Yeah. The one thing that I'd have some reservations about, and just purely, it's up to you, but I think that the fourth floor, they need a trellis, an arbor, some type of shade covering, because they're going to get blown away come summertime. And that's going to be a very uninhabitable space to sit out on your deck in a June, July, August in Charlotte. So that's my comment looking at that one particular image. Then when you flipped around to the front side facing Idlewild, well, stop there. Okay. Well, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter which one. Go back one, Jay. I think you're driving the bus, right? Okay. That roof is extremely long and tedious. It needs to be broken up in some other form or fashion. So, Jay, go to your axonometric view or the isometric view, which is the next one. And just looking at how long that facade is with only the porches articulating and breaking it up, I really like you to see if you can't break that scale, that mass up, because that is a really long wall. You've got a really nice multi-use path going by there. And it looks a little foreboding and intimidating to me, but I mean, just the rendering itself, looking at that roof line and all, that's imposing. I know Commissioner McCool had a concern about building height, and I hope you can address the building height now. But, I want to realize that down the road, there's going to be more commercial development, and we're all going to be 2, 3, maybe even 4 stories across the street. But I still think that there needs to be a better sensitivity to the scale and the mass of this building. It looks extremely long, flat, and unarticulated at this stage in the game.
Okay, yeah. To answer your first question on the balconies, the fourth floor balconies, we can investigate and definitely investigate putting some shade on there. When the architect we worked with thought that it would be better architecturally and more appealing visually to see it without that. So I think we can probably add the shade on there as well, given that, thinking that through a little bit closer in terms of the temperature in the summertime.
But be creative. You can do awnings or something different. But I mean, I wouldn't take that unit up there. That's for sure. But that's your call.
That's a great comment. And then on the massing of the roof, I mean, we can look. We'll take another look at that again. Some of the there's a little bit of articulation in the roof that kind of breaks it up, but I think we can. We'll see what we can do. I'm not a trained architect, so I don't have any ideas off the top of my head, but I can have our team look at it a little bit closer.
And that's fine, but I mean, if you think about it in brownstones or townhomes, and you have a rhythm or a bay that you can push in and push out to kind of break up that facade and use shade and shadow to your benefit. Otherwise, we have the same problem with Lidl. I mean, it's got a very long facade. It's facing the wrong way, to be frank with you, but they committed to, extensive landscaping, moving the building away from the edge, angling a little bit. So, I mean, there's things you could do.
Yeah, definitely. No, we'll take that into consideration and yeah.
What's the building height? What is your average height now?
Well, from to the roof line, it's about 40 feet, maybe 42 feet. And then if it's a 12-foot truss, the midpoint gets you to about 48 feet to the midpoint of the roof.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions? Commissioner McCool?
What's the height of the Lidl building? Do we know?
At the max, it slopes. I don't know off the top of my head. It's probably close to about a little more than 2 stories at the highest point, and then it slopes down.
It still kind of goes with my concern. It feels like a really sharp increase in building height right here. I know that in the future there may be other developments that are higher, but at the moment I can see if I was living on the Mitt Hill side in one of those single family homes and there's this huge wall of a building right across the street, I don't know how I particularly feel about that.
Yeah. I mean, with the tree save, we think with the tree save, and again, the being it architecturally, and I think once we get there and address some of these concerns to break up the massing, it will not look as imposing as maybe the number sounds, but we'll continue refining the plan to make sure that the massing is broken up and maybe is less imposing.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
I'd like to echo what Commissioner McCool just said. I spent some time out there and kind of looking at the property and comparing what this building would be with the Lidl building. And it will be an imposing building no matter how many ins and outs you have in the roof structure. As a building, you need to be, as a builder or developer, you need to be sensitive to the neighbors who live there now while keeping in mind what the future holds for the area and development. And I think a building coming in like that thrust a level of discomfort on the single family homes in the region. And I would be more comfortable with a 3-story building than I would a 4-story.
Yeah, I think the issue with that is to achieve sort of the initial goal of keeping rents so that we have we mentioned in the prior meeting, we have $3,000 a month rents, and to get to the rents that we're trying to achieve about $1,300, to have that to go to 3 stories, it just would not be possible. You sort of have to have that a certain level of density to keep the prices low. And which is partly why we chose this portion of the town, because of the land use plan talking about higher density senior housing, and so trying to meet those needs. But there's also a need to have a little bit enough density to basically spread the costs out amongst a critical mass of residents and keep costs down for those folks that don't want to go to the $3,000 a month apartments. This allows people to basically kind of have economies of scale living in a community.
Well, I can certainly understand that, but maybe playing with the layout of the building, you could change so there's more length to it. But and I think that's a problem with when you're working with a UDO with a board developed prior to this board. There are definitely expectations outlined that the new board coming on doesn't necessarily echo. And for me, I know what it feels like to be developed around and to be to feel like you're being developed out of a place you've lived your whole life. I wouldn't want to put that on anybody else. And so I think if you could reconsider how you configure your layout, then you could still keep that affordability without uprooting the comfort of the neighbors.
Yeah. But on the flip side as well, this allows for the affordability of people that are in the community to, and one of the things, one of our missions is to keep folks in the community. So there's a big give and take, but to be able to have a building like this allows some folks to stay in the community when maybe they would feel like they're getting priced out because housing prices are going up and whatnot. And this allows folks to stay in the community would be another way to look at it. But understand your concerns for sure.
I will just say to the mention of the impact on the single family homes across the street. Actually, I'm not sure those are single family homes. I think I think they're actually duplexes. And actually the feedback we've gotten from everyone that's been involved is, I think those are going to redevelop in the future, and they've been actually quite supportive. So I didn't want you to think we're hulking over a traditional single family neighborhood. I think those are all in one parcel. And they're
no, I don't think that, those units are just one portion of an entire region of Matthews. And I'm not one to be prescriptive on the architecture, or former boards have had an emphasis on brick and higher scale materials. I think there is room where you can discuss materials and bring the cost of construction down without, you just have to find that balance. And on this board, I think you're going to find maybe a different set of priorities than you would with other boards, and use that movement to create something that works, in scale with what the surrounding neighborhoods are.
Commissioner Miller, you either want to give me a high five or you've got a question.
I don't remember. I don't think so, but I should mention to Colin that they are duplexes, but they are also individual owners. I think there's about 5, maybe 6 buildings, and there's 1 or 2 owners per building, with few exceptions.
You have the hand raised icon in front of your face.
I do?
Yes. Commissioner Bland.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sitting here trying to think. I don't believe there's another 4-story building in the town of Matthews except for the hospital. Is that correct? Or is there another one somewhere?
Jay?
I think that's a 5-story building, but I don't think there's another. I don't think there's any other building above 3 stories in the town of Matthews. Is there?
Yeah, the entertainment center. The entertainment center.
The entertainment center does? Okay. Yeah. I mean, for many years I know they didn't, so I was just curious, but that's the only place there would be.
That Weaver, Bennett, and Bland building's pretty tall.
I probably want to have a skyscraper there, but
a large part of Plantation Estates is 4-story, but again, the buildings do not address the street. They're typically set back in the woods somewhat. So there's and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, just that there's a different scale than we're used to. When we have 4-story buildings, they're usually pushed back in the development and not up against the road.
Yeah, and that's something that, we could do here. It's a U-shaped building, and we actually talked we could flip it, and that brings the height away from the building. But we thought this was preferable, so it's addressing the street and screening those vehiculars to the rear. But happy to talk about it. And we'll follow up with you guys afterwards on that.
Any other questions or comments from the board or the planning board? Seeing none. Lori, is it still true that we did not have any public comments for this one?
That's correct.
Okay, I'll repeat that the public, again, has 24 hours to submit comments by email to matthews@matthewsnc.gov or by phone at 704-708-1222. And this matter will go to our planning board at their November 24th meeting and come back to us on December 14th.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate it. And we'll see you soon. Now entertain a motion to reconvene our regular meeting.
So moved.
Motion from Commissioner McCool. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Urban. Take a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley,
Yes.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Where's Jeff?
Commissioner Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Trying to get rid of the hand.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So that passes unanimously. I'm going to suggest that we take about a 10-minute break and come back at about 9:25.
Thank you.
All right, my clock is showing 9:25. Do we have the other commissioners and folks back? Ready to take a quick nap?
Yes.
It's been a long day, huh?
It's Monday, ain't it?
It's one of our longer meetings. We don't have too much farther to go, I think. Renee, are you online?
Poor Steve's been waiting all this time.
Yeah, my buddy Steve Thompson's been saying, the love of Pete, can we start this thing? It's late.
I'll never hear the end of it.
No, John, you won't.
All right, I think we have everybody back, and we'll move on to agenda item number 11, receive a report on Matthews CARES Act funding relief program from our Economic Development Advisory Committee Chair, Steve Thompson. Thank you for hanging on so late, Steve, and go ahead. The floor is yours, sir.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I will be brief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Town Commissioners. The motivation for this update is to let you guys know where we're at with the CARES Act funding that we talked about. I think that was now over a month ago now. We did have 28 applications to what we are calling round one. Of that, we funded 12 applications. 5 of those were nonprofits. The total funds distributed were $93,459.72. That's out of, if you'll recall, out of 300,000. Of that 93,000, 42,201 were for nonprofits. What we're doing now is we're in the middle of a phase 2. We've gone out to market, as it were, advertising that phase 2 is open. The one main difference between phase 1 and phase 2 is we now have approval from the county to allow for payroll, as long as it wasn't part of the payroll as part of the PPP, as well as rent or mortgage, as long as that's not, again, that it wasn't covered already by another CARES Act. Phase 2 ends next Monday, the 16th at noon. And thanks to the Red Brick Partnership, who has supported us, has supported EDAC in getting, paying for mailers, going out to everybody, as well as we have advertisements in the Matthews Mint Hill Weekly that will go out again this week, in this week's Mint Hill Weekly. But definitely thank you to everybody at the Red Brick Partnership for supporting that and getting the word out. We did have a handful, I'm not sure what the actual number was, but we did have people say that they heard about it from the postcards that we mailed out, which was a direct result of Red Brick Partnership helping and supporting that mailing and such. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. If there are any questions.
Steve, I've got a question. Can you just, in a nutshell, tell us what differentiates a application that you fund versus one that you don't?
Frankly, they have to meet all of the criteria. A large one is you got to be in Matthews, brother. Okay. There's also it has to be a business, not a hobby, as it were. So there are some revenue criteria in there. A handful of ones that we that did not pass muster. I have pretty good faith that they will pass muster in round 2. And it actually may benefit them for phase 2 because of the way that we're handling phase 2 with the more, how do you say, liberal rules in terms of what we can cover. By and large, though, the reason for us not hitting all 28 was simply they did not meet the criteria.
Very good. Other questions or comments for Steve? Commissioner Miller.
You're on mute, brother.
Sorry, you guys. As a small businessman in Matthews, I heard you mention rent, and although I can pay my mortgage, I have some tenants who are having difficulty paying their rent. Is that qualified, Steve?
Your tenants rent, you as a landlord?
That's my business, and my business is located in Matthews.
I would imagine your rent would not be covered, but your mortgage would. But you, Mr. Miller, as a commissioner, are not allowed.
Okay, thank you.
But to your question, the mortgage, I believe, would. I'd have to defer to Becky, but...
How I would answer that would be that the tenant who has to actually pay the mortgage would be eligible, but CARES Act is not able to be used for revenue replacement. So if you're a landlord and you just did not receive that rent from a tenant, that would be viewed as lost revenue, and we wouldn't be able to make up that revenue loss. But if you yourself were paying rent somewhere and you were impacted by COVID, then the rent for those impacted months would likely be eligible if you meet the other criteria.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
This is not about the Matthews grant, but just in case somebody is watching and needs to know that information that Mr. Commissioner Miller just asked about, the county has a HOPES mortgage assistance grant that if you as a landlord apply, then your tenants can request rent assistance.
Thank you. I would, I've had some extended conversations with Assistant Town Manager Hawk regarding this program, and I'm aware that Steve and John Urban and the whole EDAC committee spent a lot of time and effort on this, and we're really appreciative of all you've done. So thank you. I know it's no easy task to go through all these applications and see if you meet the criteria or not, and try to equitably distribute the money. So thank you. We really appreciate it. And Steve and John, I hope you'll extend that to the entire EDAC committee. We really appreciate it.
Certainly will, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Let Steve go to bed, and we'll keep trudging on. Thank you, Steve. See you around. Move on to agenda item number 12, the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion that we approve consent agenda number 12A through D, 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitley. We have a second by Commissioner Bland. We'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So the consent agenda passes unanimously. We'll move on to new business. Item 13A, receive the Silver Line alignment recommendation from the Silver Line Task Force. And this is another group of our citizens that are key stakeholders, and many of them multitasking because they're also members of our planning board and other committees. So we're really appreciative of this group. We'll receive an update from the chair, Bill Stevens. Go ahead, Bill.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Matthews Board of Commissioner and the citizens of Matthews. Thanks for having us. This has been a real honor and a privilege to serve as chairman of this board of the Silver Line Task Force for Matthews. We were made up of initially 15. It reduced to 14 when one moved. We were made up of Jana, Natasha, Carrie, myself, Chris Hoff, Lou, Lynn, Jennifer, Fred, Jim, David, Wyatt, Scott, and Bo. And I hope nobody's bothered. I didn't mention the last names because I hate it when I mispronounce names. Next slide. So what did we do? What was the purpose of the Silver Line Task Force? Generally speaking, we were assembled as a task force for the town of Matthews to make a recommendation back to the town board of a Silver Line alignment. So the obvious question is, in following the way that the Silver Line light rail has been discussed over the last really 4 years, but even going a lot further back than that, why couldn't we just continue with the 2016 adopted locally preferred alternative? So as with any of these development projects, acronyms are a big deal, and LPA is the acronym of the day here, okay? Or at least of the hour. So CATS reopened the current LPA to be redefined and revisited for a number of reasons, including, and certainly not excluding, and only these 5 things, but engineering, anticipated costs of the LPA through Matthews, changes in the corridor, additional coordination with land use projects, and lessons learned from the Blue Line. And so this was an opportunity for us as the town to revisit what were the options for us in bringing the Silver Line into and through Matthews. Next slide. So who were we? Who are we? We're all still here. Like I said, 15 members appointed by the mayor, 14 in the end. We consistently had on our virtual meetings 10 or 11 members attending. We started in June and ended just last week. And just last week, we had several motions where we voted on the routes for the Silver Line coming into and through Matthews. 11 members voted. We had 5 motions. We have 4 motions that were voted upon. 2 motions were approved unanimously, and 1 motion was approved with a majority, but there were some very notable dissensions among that 1 motion that we're going to talk about later on. And of course, the help that we got from Dana and Shana and Jay from the town staff, and Jenna and Andy Mock from CATS, we couldn't have done it without them. All right, so what did we do? We had 10 virtual meetings, June through November. We had 2 field trips, one of the Blue Line tour. We actually had a private car that we toured the Blue Line on. We did a downtown walking tour. We had 2 surveys, and we tried to flesh out a little bit of information among the task force members. What did we value in terms of light rail and mass transit? And what alignment was our preference? Of the map that was presented to us from CATS, we had to make some choices, and that's what we're bringing to you here tonight. Next slide. So we had virtual meetings, like I said before, and as you are well familiar with Zoom, Jay and Jenna and Andy and Dana, they presented to us lots of details about how things were aligned, the engineering details of the Silver Line coming into Matthews, whether it was going underground or above ground or required a road crossing, many, many details. So the Zoom platform, I think, served us well in a lot of contexts. In other ways, in the presentation way, being able to dig into the specifics on the computer, I thought it was helpful to me. It was hard, though, for some of us to really get a gauge of where we were. How do we come up to a point at which we can have a consensus vote, a majority vote, or a unanimous vote on anything? One of my fears going into it, and I had a conversation back during the summer with the mayor and with the town manager. One of my apprehensions was that we had 15 people on the committee, on the task force, and I was anticipating we'd come away with 16 opinions about what to do. So that made it challenging. Okay, next slide. So what do we have to work with? One of the suggestions to help mitigate some of that risk of coming out with 16 or more opinions on what to do, the town prepared some maps for us, which they sent to us or emailed to us on request. Next slide. And we had a dedicated ride-along on the Blue Line tour. Andy Mock, the CATS engineer in charge of the project, he somehow managed to provision our own private car on the Blue Line. And we started out kind of up near the hospital university area on Tryon Street and rode down to the south end and came back. And we discussed things like transit-oriented development and how the street crossing would work. The noise impacts, what would be the difference if the Silver Line was elevated versus at grade versus underground? Some of the construction details, why would we want CATS to be tearing up our roads, and what would it look like? How would it feel? That, and some of those details. Obviously, a lot of this is best judgment, right? And we have to try to understand and predict and understand the impacts of the development of the Silver Line and and once it's complete, what would be the impact to the town of Matthews of the Silver Line? So we took, and I got to say, the people that were engaged in the process that really helped us out in making these decisions. There were a lot of opinions. There were a lot of ideas tossed out. I was very impressed with the quality of people that we had on the task force, and I'm grateful to have been a part of it. I think that we had a top-notch group of people that had a lot of thought and a lot of vested interest in what we did for the Silver Line Task Force. So big shout out. I know a lot of them are on the phone now or on the Zoom call. I was very impressed. There was not a single opinion that was voiced that I thought was poorly formed. In fact, if any of them, I was critical of my own opinions. I think I was impressed with the group of people. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, next slide. One other activity that we had was a walking tour through Matthews. On October 10th, we started out at the intersection of Matthews and Ames Street to walk down Matthews Street, discussed what the alignment would be going along Matthews Street and what a station might be like there at Trade and Matthews Street. I put Trade and Matthews Middle Road. It'd be Trade and Matthews Street, actually. We looked at if we didn't use that particular alignment, if we went to the alignment that is a slight tweak on the LPA, we discussed what the Andrew Caroline / Novant station placement would look like. And a lot of other factors. So that was a valuable 2 hours spent walking through Matthews and walking along the alignment. Now, I will say this, the presentation I put together, it's not intended to be a tutorial of what the Silver Line is. I think you'll have a lot of opportunities to talk to Andy and the CATS crew and probably get a lot more details from Dana as well. And Jay, what I'm trying to do is show you what weighed on the committee, on the task force, and why we made the motions that we did, why some of them, why two of them passed unanimously and one didn't. So I hope if you have specific engineering or design or specific route questions after this presentation about the Silver Line, I can help you get to the right people, but I don't feel particularly equipped to be the right person to answer those questions, although I can try. Hopefully I will give you the correct info. Okay, thank you. Broad summary. In general, the Silver Line is 26 miles of light rail starting at, we can say it starts in Matthews and at the CPCC campus. It travels through Matthews and then through uptown Charlotte, out past the airport, and then out to Belmont. There's 27 stations, a bunch of park and rides, and they are expecting to enter, according to this slide, this is from CATS, by the way, they're expecting to enter design in 2020 And I believe they are saying they want to be done with construction by 2030, although those dates are all pretty soft, I think. Next slide. Thank you. So what does it mean to Matthews? We have designed 4 miles of trails coming through Matthews. That's approximate. We have 4 stations, 1 park and ride, maybe another one, depending on how things shake out. We have the Matthews LPA, the Matthews Locally Preferred Alternative modifications that are being proposed today. Now, what you see on the map in the lower part of the screen is the LPA as it was approved in 2016 by the town of Matthews and endorsed by CATS in 2017. It has the Gallery Station, which isn't technically Matthews, and then the Matthews Township Parkway and Novant. This alignment brings the rail right through the Novant campus, and then down towards along Matthews Mint Hill Road down to the Sportsplex, and then out under 485 to the CPCC Levine campus. Okay, next slide. So the biggest conversation that we had was about the modified LPA and the redesigned route going along Matthews Street through town. So the next 2 slides are trying to introduce this difference between what we're calling the modified LPA and the other route going through town. We'll get to that in a minute. This modified LPA, the majority of what it does is it moves the light rail station from the Novant campus to just off the Novant campus, just to the southeast side of the parking area for Novant. And it is designed that it would go along Monroe Road, down the center of Monroe Road, across at Industrial Boulevard, go over CSX and behind the police station, and follow along Sam Newell, and then cross under 51 at Sam Newell and 51, and come out behind the Novant parking area along Andrew Caroline. And you might remember the Andrew Caroline Road is proposed to go through to Matthews Mint Hill Road in the future. And so this would roughly follow along that path of the Andrew Caroline Road and come out to Matthews Mint Hill Road and then go down to the new Independence Point Parkway, through the Sportsplex, the Entertainment District in the Sportsplex, and then cross under 485 down to CPCC. So that's a lot. I'm going to try to keep my next descriptions a little bit shorter. Okay, thank you. CSX alignment. So sorry, can you go down to the next slide? Thank you. So this is the kind of the counter proposal to the modified LPA. This is the reroute going through town. So this one, it differs at Industrial Boulevard. Instead of going along the back of the police station and down Sam Newell and across 51 there, it is going to curl under 51, kind of near Team Road, and then up Matthews Street, past Matthews Building Supply and into downtown, and have a station at Matthews Street and Trade Street. From there, it's going to follow along the south side of Matthews Mint Hill Road, and just the way that the modified LPA would. So those were the 2 gorillas in the corner, so to speak. Which one do we pick? Do we pick this? And again, these are my maps. These are not CATS maps. So if there's slight differences on what you see here versus what you get from CATS, it's because I'm not a map guy. I'm a computer hack. So this is the best that I could do. There's much more detailed diagrams further in this presentation, as well as I know CATS says it all. Okay, can you go back up to the CSX corridor slide? Thank you. So the other decision that we had to come to is this difference between Monroe Road versus the CSX alignment. One of the proposed routes was to, instead of go along Monroe Road, we talked about aligning the rail along the CSX rail line and down into Matthews similar to the Matthews Street alignment. Okay, forward to. All right, so in summary, we had basically 3 points of interest. We had the Monroe Road versus CSX. We had what are we going to do with downtown? And then whether or not we were going to approve the Independence Point Parkway CPCC alignment. So what do we do? Next. Okay, so this is just a little more detail. Actually, it's a lot more detail. You can see very clearly here from CATS. This is a CATS map, not my map. It's going down the middle of Monroe and turning into Independence Point Parkway. And the blue line is along the CSX rail. Next slide. Now, here's more detail. We get the 2 different alignments coming through town. This is the bulk of the discussions, the bulk of the interest, the bulk of the passion from the task force. The yellow line is the modified LPA. You can see that the red dot just barely to the right of the Sam Newell words there is the station that would represent the Novant campus. Obviously, it'd be bigger than just the dot. In that case, it'd be longer, but you get the idea. And the green line represents the reroute option coming under Matthews, under NC 51, and then along Matthews Street and ending up with the station at Matthews and Trade, and then down Matthews Mint Hill Road. Next slide. Independence Point Parkway, our vote was an up or down vote basically on this alignment. Did we agree to this alignment? Did we agree to some of the nuances that would come with this alignment, depending on what happens to the ENT district? And the power lines just to the left of the dot for the Independence Point Parkway Entertainment District Sportsplex Station. Those are power lines, and CATS needs to figure out what they're going to do with those. And so there might be some minor tweaks. And then it's going to go under 485 and end up over by CPCC. Okay, so just to cover the vote, and I'll open up for questions after this. Monroe Road versus CSX corridor. After understanding the benefits of having what is called transit-oriented development, and the benefit of having CATS rebuild Monroe Road, hopefully with a lot more improvements than what we have currently along Monroe Road. We unanimously approved the Monroe Road alignment over CSX. I will say that when we were on the ride along, on the blue line ride along, the stations that had the most interesting character, the most interesting appeal, were by far the ones that went through populated areas, the ones that were the parts of the line that were the least interesting and to be blunt, ugly. They were the ones along the rail line. So that made a big impact on me personally, and I think it had some impacts on some of the other members as well. The downside is that there's a hunch that it will create more traffic for us along Monroe Road, people trying to get to the station. Okay, next slide. No, the big vote was along, like I've been saying, the green line or the yellow line coming through town. There's a lot of pros and cons. There's a lot of different opinions of what is a pro and what is a con. So we took the vote last week, and it came up 8-4 in favor of the Matthews Street alignment over the Novant campus alignment, or I should say the Andrew Caroline / Novant alignment. Why? There were comments in support of the West Matthews Street alignment because people thought that it would be nearer to downtown. It would have a positive impact on downtown. It would encourage changes to the downtown landscape for development and redevelopment, similar to what's happened along the Blue Line in a lot of the areas, such as South Boulevard and Tryon Street. The station would be located in a spot that would really encourage walk-up ridership and be better integrated into the town of Matthews. The thinking is that the station by Andrew Caroline and Novant is just a few steps too far to be comfortably integrated into Matthews. This was not a universal for the comments in support of this alignment. The one thing that weighs on CATS heavily is how are they going to pay for all of this? And the West Matthews Street Green Line, in this case, would be less expensive than the Andrew Caroline station. And the thinking is that they would be better positioned to get the government grants that they would need to complete the light rail. And lastly, it makes the town more walkable and will push automobile traffic around Matthews instead of coming through Matthews. And again, these are comments that we received in support of that alignment, not necessarily universally held. Okay, so why did 4 people vote against it? And honestly, it was a tough vote. And I think if I can say one thing about this group is I think we had a lot of respect for each other. I don't think anybody was, at least in my opinion, I don't think anybody was talking down or had bad things to say about the other people because they had one position or another. It was all very accepting and very well thought out. So why 8-4 and not the other way around? The comments in opposition to the West Matthews Street alignment were traffic impacts. Every 8 minutes, 6 to 7 times an hour, a train would pass through, and to some extent would impact traffic. And the thinking on how much that impact would be, it depends on how you analyze it, whether you take into account the stoplight there that's already there, and exactly how much impact it would be. Parking, obviously the downtown station would be likely a walk-up station, no parking immediately built by it, although that wasn't our focus. They were just hypothetically proposing that it wouldn't be a station with a lot of parking right built into it. It'd be a walk-up station. So that means that people would park elsewhere in town and possibly put a strain on the parking throughout the town of Matthews. Some people thought that there would be pedestrian impacts, that some people would be wanting to walk that part of the road or along Matthews Street, and they might be impacted by the train. And there were some comments about instead of going underground at Sam Newell and 51, that the town board should consider a bridge over 51 instead of tunneling under 51. And that was, again, hypothetical, but pretty good idea from CATS is that would be more cost competitive than going under. And then there's a bunch of other considerations there, noise and the visual impacts of a bridge through Matthews. But anyway, that was a good comment, I thought, about a potential solution to the high cost of going underground. And there were some suggestions made that there simply wasn't enough information on November 4th for us to conclusively make a suggestion. And one way that we could have more information to make a better informed decision would be to have a traffic impact analysis before actually making the decision, Andrew Caroline / Novant versus the downtown alignment. And some members strongly, sorry, can you go back just for 1 second? Some members strongly preferred the Andrew Caroline alignment to avoid the impacts of downtown, just like some people thought that the transit-oriented development opportunities in town would be a positive. Some people think it's a negative, and I completely understand that. It would be an impact. One of the members during, or I should say, after our Blue Line tour, he made the statement: if you like the way Matthews is, then understand that the light rail is going to change that. And so if we go with this comment, I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. If we go with the downtown Matthews alignment, there will be changes. it will change the character of downtown. And the question is, will that be beyond what is currently a treasured, beyond what we want as a treasured asset? Okay, next slide. And the last thing that we voted on was the alignment for the entertainment district and the sportsplex going down to CPCC. And we unanimously voted in favor of the alignment as designed. All right. I made it. I didn't make it a 3-hour presentation. Okay, questions, comments?
Great job, Bill.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Do we have any questions? I can see everybody now. Commissioner Whitley.
Bill, did I hear you, were the plans planning on going over 485 or under 485?
Under.
Had that always been to go under? Was there not some discussion about going over 485?
That's my understanding. It's always been under. Although that would be a Kat's question.
Can I clarify? I'll just say they're going under 51. They're going over 485.
Oh, sorry.
Depending on the alignment, I should say 51. They're going under 51 if, well, I guess in both scenarios, under 51 at West Matthew Street. So it's a little higher. The current 51 is higher, and so they could sort of tunnel under it. But at the trade and 51 and Sam Newell, they would have to trench it. And I don't want to I'll try to answer some questions, but I don't want to get in the weeds because we really want Katz at our special meeting to answer all of these great detailed questions that I'm sure you guys have.
So thanks, Dana. That was an important correction. Thank you.
So for the board's benefit, we're going to have several additional meetings. We're certainly not deciding on alignment today. And I think I want to reiterate in front of Bill and other committee members that are on this call how much we appreciate you undertaking this very difficult task, and certainly say thank you to Dana as well for helping shepherd the effort, because it's not been easy. I've attended only a couple of the meetings, and I kind of did that on purpose because I didn't want to influence the outcome. But the ones that I did attend, there was some very spirited but respectful conversation, and I think that this group has really thought a lot of the pros and cons of either alignment, and we're going to have to decide. You know, either way you go on the two that we have, there are going to be cons for either one of them. So, and there'll be a lot of pros as well. So we just have to decide. Come to a consensus. It's going to be difficult for us as well, I think, to come together and endorse one alignment. But again, we're very, very thankful. I hope that your committee got some ice cream tonight. Bill. I had promised this group that the town would have an ice cream party for them.
We're giving them ice cream. Don't worry, Mayor. We're getting ice cream orders and delivering it to them.
That'll be great. I saw that. That's fantastic. Very small token of our appreciation. But again, this was very difficult. I saw the maps that staff had printed out, and they were, huge, 3 foot by 4 foot maps, and they're trying to track, it's very difficult to see some of the difficulties. And I know a lot of the committee members not only went out and walked and on their own visited different sites. So I think we're going to have a lot of more discussion on this before we wrap our arms around one particular thing that we can embrace. But are there any other questions for Bill or Dana tonight?
Well, I'll just say, if you would like some more detail on that walking tour through Matthews, or you would like for me to repeat that with any of the board members, I'd be happy to find the time to do that.
That's great. I in talking with town manager Blodgett, we had discussed that it's probably a good idea for all the elected leaders to go do this walkabout as well at some point to see some of the things you saw, Bill. I was out of town when you guys did your walk. I intended to participate in that, but I wasn't here. But any other questions or comments? All right, great job, Bill. We'll be talking to you soon. Thank you very much that was a very good presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, well,
thank you. Thank you.
All right, so we've got some important decisions to make in the not too distant future. So stay tuned. I'd like to go on to 13B, and I mentioned this at the top of our meeting, the possible renaming of Stumptown Park. We have had American Legion Post 235 come forward and ask if the town would, and I'm sending this out just for information, we're not going to vote, obviously, if we would consider renaming Stumptown Park Stumptown Veterans Memorial Park, based on some of the recent improvements and things that were done there, and have it as to honor our veterans. So just throwing it out. It wasn't on the agenda, it came in late, so maybe put this on a future agenda. I'd like you to think about it. As Hazen and I discussed this afternoon, Stumptown kind of sends a mixed message in and of itself. I know it's part of our heritage, but basically meant, hey, these guys came and cut all the trees down, so it's not probably a fantastic name for a park anyway. But does anybody have any comments on that? It'll be a future agenda item, and we can discuss it. Anybody have any feelings one way or the other?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Mr. Bland?
I was just say that, we've done a lot of great things in the town, and we've made a lot of progress in the last couple of years and stuff, but we don't want to lose completely touch with our heritage and the things that made Matthews what it is. And I've been here probably a lot longer than a lot of folks have, with few exceptions, but when I first moved here to Matthews in the 80s, I mean, it was just like country town, okay? And Stumptown meant something to the people that lived here at that time, still meant, and then they had the Stumptown Festival that went on for years and years and years. Sure. And a lot of people put a lot of effort into Stumptown Park. And, at once upon a time, they wanted to build a shopping center there where that park was. And it was an integral part of the downtown and part of what this community was for many, many years. And so my personal thing is I think that would be I'm glad that we were able to, accommodate the veterans and let the memorial. I'm all in favor of that. But I don't think they should trample over what a lot of other people did for many, many years before they got involved in doing that. So I would be opposed to it, but that's just one voice.
Again, the request is not to eliminate Stumptown. It was to rename it Stumptown Veterans Memorial Park, to add the words Veterans Memorial.
Oh, that's not what you said. Okay.
Let me rephrase that. It's not to eliminate
the difference.
Just to add the two words in between Stumptown and Park. Add Veterans.
Well, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But that's a totally different thing.
That was my fault. I didn't communicate that very well. But yeah, it's not to eliminate Stumptown.
The president's words do matter. The mayors do too.
I'm not going to comment on it. All right. We'll move on to the mayor's report. I'll try to be brief. I know it's been a long meeting. We have a few items. The first I'd like to mention is this afternoon, the Matthews Rotarians had an event where they honored veterans in honor of Veterans Day, where they gave Chick-fil-A lunches out to veterans. Hazen, do you recall how many people showed up today? The veterans is about 60, I think, or 70, something like that. Maybe more.
I never heard, Mayor. I never heard the number. It wasn't, traditionally they had over 200 in the room, and maybe 75. That's a guess, though.
This is a really nice thing the Rotary Club did. They had myself and the mayor of Mint Hill there, and a lot of the Rotarians were there. Paul Bailey was there handing the lunches out, and I think the veterans really enjoyed as they pulled up, their names were announced and what service they participated in. So a really nice gesture for them. I think they really enjoyed it. So that was a nice thing that happened today. I also wanted to mention that a second grade teacher at Matthews Elementary, Jenny Letchworth, who Mayor Pro Tem Garner's son is in her class, they wrote letters to the mayor as a class project, and it was like being on 60 Minutes. I mean, these questions these second graders are coming up with is, hey, how come you don't fix the holes in the road? And I think we need a skating rink. Why don't we have a skating rink? And why don't we have a water park? But it was really good. I responded to them. It was a lot of fun, but it's really kind of neat to see what 8 and 9-year-olds are thinking about. But that was very, very enjoyable. exercise where I responded to their questions. Speaking of Veterans Day, I would like to just say that Veterans Day is upon us, and I'd like to take a few minutes tonight to honor our nation's veterans. Of course, on Veterans Day, which is November 11th, we honor all those who have served in the military as well as the families that support them. And for their bravery and their sacrifice, both at home and abroad, our servicemen and women deserve our support, respect, and gratitude. I also want to thank the Military Veterans Advisory Committee, MVAC, for their service and great work advising the town board on matters related to veterans. And, you know, I've often told that group, if you've looked at their minutes, you can tell they're a military organization or they've served in the military, because they're probably our most organized advisory committee. We are fortunate here in Matthews to have an active American Legion Post 235, the Hooks Work Post, led by Commander Mark Defano, and Post 235 is spearheading a community-wide effort to restore the Matthews Veterans Memorial at Stumptown Park. And phase 2 was recently completed. If you've been by there, it looks really nice. They have a few more monuments that they have to finish up, and it's really, really nice. Flags are up. I talked to Mr. Tefano, and he said that during the next few months, we're going to have contests to complete the murals. They have the walls up for the murals. Everything's looking really nice out there. We will be holding our annual Veterans Day ceremony on Wednesday at 11 a.m. at Stumptown Park. And if it's at all possible for you to attend, it would be great if you could. Please invite any veterans that you know and your family or friends. Please also wear a mask and practice social distancing. We want to celebrate our veterans. We don't want anybody to get sick. So please do that. I think there's plenty of room at Stumptown Park, so that shouldn't be an issue. And one final thing I want to mention tonight is we lost a real giant of someone that contributed to our community in Miss Iris DeVore, who passed away on November 3rd. Many of you knew her. I didn't know her well. I met her a few times. Very nice lady, very, very involved in our community. She and her husband, Fred, moved to Matthews in 1965, raised their 3 children here. She was involved with her church, which is the church I attend, Matthews United Methodist. She started the church library there and was on the construction committee that helped design and build the current church campus, which is very beautiful. In 1972, she founded the Happy Times Club, program dedicated to providing social and emotional venues for seniors to socialize. And in 1975, she established the Melody Makers Senior Choir, who visited older and disabled adults to sing and offer words of encouragement. And for those of you that have been around here for a while, when you hear about clubs like the Happy Times Club and the Melody Makers, I think it brings back some good memories of the history of Matthews. 1977, she co-founded a program that would eventually become the Matthews Help Center, perhaps her greatest legacy to the town. Of course, the Help Center provides crisis assistance to those in the Matthews community that need it. She was a charter member of the Matthews Human Services Council, a collaborative group of nonprofit organizations serving the greater Matthews community. And in 1999, at age 70, she started advocating for a building dedicated specifically to seniors. And in 2006, that dream became a reality with the Levine Senior Center. The road to that center was named DeVore Lane in her honor. And she's received numerous accolades over the years, recognizing her service to the community. Huge, long list. She's won about every award you can win, and all well-deserved. So we all appreciate and remember Ms. DeVore, and keep her family in your thoughts and prayers during this difficult time. But what a true example for all of us to follow in our community, and just a fantastic asset. I'm glad that the DeVores chose Matthews in 1965 to move, because she's certainly left her mark on this community. She'll be very much missed.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report this evening.
Now the town manager's report. You said you have.
The only thing I want to remind everybody is tomorrow we'll have the second 21-day racial equity challenge. I hope everybody's been kind of following day by day. It's not super time consuming, but it is very enlightening. So we'll have session number 2 at 6:30 tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed about some of the reading material and the things that you listen to and watch is a lot of them are very humorous. So it's somewhat entertaining and still educational, but I've caught myself laughing out loud a few times with some of the observations some of these folks are making, but very important topic. So thank you. Do you have anything else, Hazel?
No, sir.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner McCool. Roll call vote. Commissioner Bland.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
I vote yes as well. I'm going to bed. Good night.
Stay safe, y'all.
Bye.
Good night, all. Be safe.